Other questions? Samum Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I promise it's a quick one. So we're talking about diversion. We know the demand is high, the supply is low, and rents are high. Where do you divert them to? If you're using a diversion program, where are you finding housing that they can afford if they couldn't afford the place they were at?
Mr. Chair, through you, Tim Birch, for the record. That is where I mentioned earlier Operation Home, and I realize that may be Clark County jargon. So it is a rapid rehousing program we use as the relocation part of this. We have about 5 people whose full-time job is to go out and recruit landlords, work with them. We host landlord summits 3 times a year where we use satisfied landlords as tools to recruit other landlords. We have incentive bonuses for sign-on, $500 for your first unit, up to $1,000 for your second unit. We'll also not only put down the deposits, but if the client that we're case managing a unit does damage that exceeds the damage deposits, we're there with a backup account as well. So we are doing a private public partnership with our landlords to say, look, we're in this with you. And it's not just the $4,000 of back rent. There's $12,000 on average a case manager goes in each client. Those case managers are there. And when we have multiple units in a particular location, we have people on site that are available for those folks to intervene before law enforcement or anybody else has to ever be called to try to help people learn how to be good neighbors to each other now that they're housed. So there's significant investment in this. We've seen several, we already have about 1,200 families in just the last year we've been able to move through this in this tight market. And that's when the rent was, according to the Apartment Association, I believe it was sort of like a 4% vacancy rate. Latest numbers show us about 6.7, so it's starting to soften a bit. So there's a few more units coming online. So we have great hope that we'll continue to build on the success we have and work with landlords who are willing to work with us. And a big part of that, and not to turn this into commercial, though, is anybody who owns that second home or that room that wants to go to helphopehome.org and find out all the information they need to become a partner for that. All the information is there if you want to learn anything that Southern Nevada is doing around their continuum of care and homelessness.
For the record, I just want to add one piece. Kevin Schiller, Deputy County Manager, through the chair to the Assemblywoman. The issue of where they go, and kind of to tag on to that, I failed to touch on this, but the issue of that community housing fund where we're building affordable housing, that's great, right? But it takes time. The other piece is a large percentage of that is also rehabilitation of existing affordable units, because I can go to that owner and say, I'm going to rehab your unit so that you maintain that affordability for another 25 to 30 years. That's a big piece of where we're using those dollars, because we will literally build all that affordable housing, and if we don't, for lack of a better term, maintain the existing affordable housing, we'll actually end up with a net zero or worse. So that's the other piece. You're asking where they're going. We're rehabbing so that we can keep people in units, but also that's the other, I don't want to say it's bribery, but the issue of saying to them, hey, we'll rehab your entire complex. You have guaranteed rent, you maintain affordability, and we have a client relationship that guarantees, this is the other part on the case management, we guarantee the condition of the unit for that private entity. So it is an incentive. So.
Other questions? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've encountered a technical difficulty. I think there's some folks that are trying to access the meeting that can't right now. Could we take just a moment
Okay,
to double check what's going on?
We're going to take a brief pause, check with BPS. Are you talking about online?
I believe online, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we are just in a brief pause.
Don't anybody leave.
Right.
Stay where you are.
Mr. Chair, I just got a text message and it says it flipped to part 2, so they must have it.
Can we get confirmation from BPS that we're good?
Yes, Chair. There is a second YouTube link posted. They just need to refresh it, and you are live.
Okay. So whatever the issue was, if they just refresh the screen, they'll have a second YouTube channel available to them. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, you are correct.
Okay. Okay, so we're good to continue. Sorry. Do we have any additional questions? Not seeing any online or in Las Vegas. Nobody here. So I will go to. Okay. If I could have Assemblywoman Danielle Moreno, if you would
Thank you,
give the
Mr. Chair. I
motion.
move to approve.
I'm sorry.
Move to approve.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve, second by Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion. All in favor say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. And we are, okay, let's see. I'd like to go, so that's that item. Give me 1 second here. Okay, we're going to go on the items now. We're going to go to item 12, 15, 16, and K. To whoever's here for that part. I know we have someone from the governor's office. Anybody else? Okay, well, just come forward, whoever's going to. Let's keep the presentation as brief as we can, and then we'll go to our questions.
Chair, could you say which items we're combining again?
Sorry, we're doing 12, 15, 16, and K, item K. Ms. Bordelin?
So if it works for you, Chair, I will intro the items that are in 12. Julia Peak, who I believe is online, will intro the items for 15 and K, and then however you'd like to take questions. Does that work?
Correct. So that was Ms. Bordelin from the governor's office, just for the record, so we can make sure that we knew who said that. Okay, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Bailey Bordelin, for the record, Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Sisolak. I know it's been a long day, but thank you. I am so proud to be here today on behalf of the governor and the executive branch. So as I mentioned, I will go through the multiple parts of item F12. It is a work program for $151 million, and there are 5 sub-recipient sub-grants that makes up. This is an investment in health preparedness for Nevada. This is a significant investment that, together with the other items that we have pulled, create the governor's statewide plan to invest federal relief dollars that present a unique opportunity for our state to utilize and serve Nevadans with critical public health and healthcare needs. As you know, the pandemic stretched and tested our health infrastructure in unimaginable ways. This investment will ensure we take the lessons learned and put them into action. The worked product you have before you today reflects over a year of work and collaboration of the state and community stakeholders on the right way to meet this moment to best position Nevada for the future. So first, there is a $75 million investment in the Nevada Public Health Laboratory at the University of Nevada, Reno. As many of you know and have seen firsthand, the State Public Health Lab was pushed to the limits during the pandemic. This investment will increase the space and capacity of the lab to meet the demands of our state. President Sandoval recognized very early on in the pandemic that the state requires this critical investment and has worked closely with us to ensure that the plan you have before you is reflective and responsible to the needs of the state and improved future services and response times. The next item, and these next 2 numbers are slightly adjusted from what you have seen. There was numbers lost in translation, so I wanted to bring that to your attention. The numbers that you are in your document show 35 and 35 for the next 2 projects, and those will actually be 40 and 30, but we get to the same total number, so just flagging that so you're tracking as I'm explaining it. The next investment is $40 million towards an ambulatory care center, academic health center at the UNLV School of Medicine. Unlike the item above, and in partnership with Nevada Health and Bioscience Corporation, this is not a single source project. So there are other dollars that will be involved in this project. The governor is proud to support the continuation of the School of Medicine's contribution to meet the critical needs of our community. This facility will provide services targeted to meet the needs of residents with a focus on eliminating health disparities and access challenges, including critical mental and behavioral health needs. This is a high priority for President Whitfield, and we appreciate his leadership focusing on serving the community. Third is a partnership between the state, the University Medical Center, and the Nevada Health and Bioscience Corporation. $30 million, if approved, will go to NHBC to stand up a public health lab in Southern Nevada, and UMC will operationalize it. DHHS has worked hard to identify a number of lab deficiencies within the state, and specifically Southern Nevada, some of which are services we currently have to send out of state. I would be remiss not to recognize UMC for their incredible leadership and partnership throughout the pandemic. They have been a trusted partner who also stood up new testing and services overnight when the community needed it. A new lab under their leadership will not duplicate but fill critical gaps, will be transformational for our state health infrastructure. Last, the two smallest items in this work program are $3 million for each UNR and UNLV's schools of public health. We've talked a lot this morning about how workforce is a piece that we can't leave behind as we try to make progress in these areas. The workforce that is produced by these schools is critical to the success of all of the public health investments before you today. UNR will use this investment to transform what is currently the health lab into a robust space to allow the School of Public Health and DHHS to collaborate and prepare for the next public health emergency. UNLV will house the Nevada Minority Health and Equity Coalition to improve the health outcomes of our most disenfranchised and vulnerable populations. These items are before you today because they are transformational for our state and have been vetted and developed as strategic priorities for use of the American Rescue Dollars. So the format you have before you looks different than proposals that have undergone the CIP process. I want to put on the record that labor standards couldn't be a higher priority for the governor, so both the State Public Health Lab and the proposed Southern Nevada Lab will be built, if approved, with public project labor agreements. The UNLV School of Medicine building will be built in the same standards as the initial creation of the school, prevailing wage with a union general contractor. If approved, the state will remain actively in the work with our partners as we report back to the federal government and worked under the timelines and rules of the dollars. So with that, Chair, that's an explanation of F12. We could stop there, or Julia can jump in on F15.
Let's go ahead and let's do them all, and then we'll get to the questions so we can go quickly.
Perfect. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Interim Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Julia Peak, and I serve as the Deputy Administrator for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health over Community Health Services. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak today on Work Program 23 FRF 32232, which requests ARPA funding to support infrastructure and staffing resources for our local public health systems. DHHS and the Governor's Office reached out to Nevada's local health agencies to request a list of funding priorities that would allow them to better offer routine public health services to their residents to impact the population health in their communities, as well as items that would allow them to continue to respond to COVID and other future public health issues. After considering the requests, the projects noted in this work plan were supported by DHHS and the Governor's Office and prepared to be presented to the committee for your consideration. I am happy to provide a high-level summary of the projects, understanding there's a time issue. So for the counties of Churchill, Mineral, Pershing, and Eureka, this request would support the development of a building to serve as the Central Nevada Health District in Fallon. This building would be a central location for administrative operations, but also clinical services. In addition to the investment in the Central Nevada Health District, we're also requesting an investment for the Washoe County Health District, also a building that would serve as their satellite site for services to their community, but also more importantly to update their tuberculosis clinic that really serves as an opportunity to provide care for patients that have a very infectious disease and need to be in a negative pressure room. Carson City Health and Human Services has requested that they are able to extend services that were, or staffing that was retained during the COVID response that they would like to continue through December of 2026. This includes community health workers, bilingual nursing staff, and staff to support the ongoing vaccination and epidemiology needs. Last but not least, the Southern Nevada Health District, as also noted in public comment, provides a critical role to their community, but specifically as it relates to environmental health services. They need to increase fees. They've not increased fees for over a decade. And this request would actually allow them to defer the approved fee for a year so as to not require the businesses to pay an additional expense while they're still recovering, and then also not to have that expense passed on to the public and consumers who frequent their businesses. So in summary, the investments are as follows. Central Nevada Health District, $1.6 million. And I'll note that these are not to exceed amounts, as some work needs to be done still on the exact dollar amount. Washoe County Health District for no more than $10 million. Carson City Health and Human Services for no more than 3.7, Southern Nevada Health District for 5.5 million, for a total request in this work program of $20.8 million. In closing comments, I want to note that I'm joined today in the room by my colleagues from Churchill County and Carson City Health and Human Services, as well as remotely by my colleagues at Washoe County Health District. We are happy to answer questions that the committee has, and I again want to thank you for your consideration. I know and appreciate that this is a very large request for public health, but the demand that's been placed on these teams has been huge over the last 2 years, and this would really allow us to right public health in a number of ways. I can go on to item K if you would like, or I can pause.
Yes, no, please go.
Okay, for the record, Julia Peak, continuing on item K. I want to start by thanking the governor for approving the request to remove assessment fees for the counties of Churchill, Eureka, Pershing, and Mineral counties. This is just one step in the formation of Nevada's first regional rural public health authority, and it has been well over a decade in the making. It was through the COVID response that these counties were able to see the need for local public health services and united to develop this plan to move forward. As is required within NRS 439-4905, these counties put forward a request to remove county assessments paid to our division to support the public health nursing, disease investigation, and environmental health services within these counties. These funds could be retained then by the counties, and they could provide the service locally. This request was reviewed and supported by the division and the governor's office prior to the presentation to your committee today. These counties plan to cease the payment of the assessments to align with our biennial budget starting on July 1st, 2023, so there's no impact on the current year assessments. Though this plan has many moving parts to ensure optimal public health service delivery and a seamless transition to local support, there are two parts that require formal approval. This request being heard today for the assessments, and a request to our Board of Health to form a regional health authority. These counties will be presenting to the Board of Health later this year for approval. That concludes my comments, but we are again happy to answer items on F, 15, 16, or item K. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any other presenters? Okay, great. I'm going to go to Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you so much, Chair Dennis, for the question. So my question is more specific to item K. This is very exciting, standing up a new rural Central Nevada Health District. They're going to be taking over these services in a year from now. So we've got a nice runway here for us to get this up and going. I see in the follow-up documents we're talking about, as well, like a satellite public health laboratory in Fallon. So some really cool stuff that's happening out there. Could you just really briefly, for the record, talk a little bit more about how this is going to move us towards the goal of a stronger, more robust public health infrastructure, and how specifically this new district is going to kind of play a role in getting us towards those goals? Because as opposed to the state doing it, it's going to be locally controlled. So how does that get us towards our goal?
For my pleasure. Julia, for the record, and then I will defer to my colleagues at Churchill County, because County Manager Barbie and his team have done a phenomenal job. And so how does the public health delivery system change when it's done locally? It's, in my opinion, an observation based on the COVID response, done very well when done locally. Nevada is only one state that still remains a largely decentralized public health department. And so the state geographically covers a lot of the county, but not by population size. And one of the things that we saw during COVID is really the ability to understand the needs of community. These folks live in the community and they serve the community, versus, again, the state's doing the best they can with the resources they have, but we don't live in the community and we aren't able to as quickly mobilize services. The other thing is the collaboration with COVID, again, related to the local emergency management response, was incredible when done locally. And then they could, again, reach out to the state when they need additional supports or other things. But as done locally, that's a really mature public health system. Many states have the formation of locally delivered services, again, with a level of state oversight and support and even surge support. But really to have the services done locally is a much better delivery of the public health model. And with that, I will pass it on to County Manager Barbie or Shannon, if you have any.
For the record, Jim Barbie, Churchill County Manager. I would just add and echo the comments that Julia made. I think if we want to see what this is going to look like moving forward, we only need to look behind us and what we've just gone through with the pandemic and the successes that we saw there. When this thing started, it became apparent that the state was going to struggle in terms of being able to have the outreach, especially with two central locations for most of the population in the state. The rules were going to have to step up, and we stepped up as eager partners. And it was a good partnership, and it continues to be a good partnership. And it will be a good partnership beyond the formation of this Central Nevada Health District, because we will continue to rely on the state as we move forward for guidance along the way. So, but what we did see on the ground is by putting these systems together, I mean, this building would actually go on a site that has already partially been funded and has infrastructure on it from the COVID response period that we had before. This would just be adding better facilities on that and carrying forward beyond the pandemic, hopefully past the pandemic, onto other health concerns as we move forward on the site that we developed for this. And that site was visited by Washoe County residents, by Douglas County residents, by Eureka County residents, by folks from out of state, both California all the way, I believe, to Texas is the furthest that we had coming through either testing or getting vaccinations in our site. So that infrastructure stays, and this puts a building in place that gives us much greater function to be able to do a better job regionally. But yeah, it's going to be a good working relationship between the state and us.
Okay, I know Vice Chair Carlton has a few questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to focus on item F12, the different buildings that are cited, and thank you for putting all those things on the record. There were a lot of questions around that, and thank you for the conversations that we've had about answering all my questions on that. I just have a couple for the record. So the amounts that were determined for each of the projects, could you just very briefly just give us an idea of where you came up with these amounts? And I'm hoping that you weren't too conservative, because we'd much rather have you overguess than underguess and have to come back and ask for more money. And as far as how all the renovation and construction work is going to be done on this, and then also what are some of the timelines on some of these projects?
Bailey Bordelin, for the record, thank you for the question. We will have the entities speak to how the calculations have been done. It is a case-by-case basis as we've worked through it. I will note that with you in our public health lab, for instance, the number has changed as inflation and the cost of doing business has happened. So we have been accommodating for that as we go along and through the process. With the timelines, these are ARP dollars, so time is of the essence on all of these dollars. The dollars have to be committed by 2025. Projects have to be done by 2026. So we will get up and get going and make sure that the dollars can be done responsibly and under all of the rules and the timelines that we have. So projects will commence as quickly as we can. With that, I'll have Maureen speak to two of the items, and I'll step out of the way so the other entities can come forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bordelin. And I don't need a whole budget. I just need a 60,000-foot view of how you came up with these dollar amounts. Thank you.
So in other words, just a really quick answer.
Sure, thank you. Maureen Schaefer, for the record, Chair through Vice Chair Carlton. Maureen Schaefer with Nevada Health and Bioscience Corporation, the developer and owner of the future prospective projects. Ambulatory Care Center, we have looked at this building in consultation with the Krikorian School of Medicine and the Dean, and talked about their current needs. And we're going through a business planning process right now about current needs and prospective needs and the size that would fit on the current site, the 9 acres that we have the existing medical education building on, and looked at conservatively what would be with the capital needs and FF&E, the equipment, and the current services that would go into the building. And we're looking at a $125 to $140 million building. With this appropriation, with current philanthropic catalytic contributions that we're prepared to make as a corporation, with corporate donations that we're talking to prospective folks in the community, with ones that have been made that are in abeyance right now, new market tax credits, other things that we've done to assemble a financing stack like what we did with our first building. That's how we're coming up with how we would potentially build and finance the second building, both in terms of services, capital size, and then financing. On the second building, we did a similar process without launching the business planning process with UMC. BSL Level 3 labs are built with what you call performance spec. You know what you need to put in them, and then how you build it is how you build it. But once we would receive approval of this, we would also do a existing similar financing stack as well with different sources of funding. And we would go to work and see what else, based on a similar business planning process, needs and wants for these types of services we need to provide to the community, and build the capital building around that, and then finance it behind that with different forms of capital. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. And your timelines?
Well, I believe this particular funding source needs to be spent by the end of 2026. So pre-development, in terms of the planning, takes between 6 and 10 months. We would start that tomorrow morning. And from there, the planning would begin, and then we would hope to break ground within a year. And this would be the first spend funds on that because of the timelines around this particular capital.
And these two particular buildings would be owned by the Nevada Health and Bioscience Corporation. They would not be owned by the state or NSHE. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because there's a formula in NSHE's formula that they have a square footage thing. If it's not owned by NSHE, it's going to be outside that formula. So we just want to make sure we know exactly how these buildings are going to be looked at in the future. So they're going to be owned by Nevada Health and Bioscience. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair.
So, Ms. Schaefer, you need to identify when you answer so we know it's you saying it and not her.
I'm sorry. Maureen Schaefer for the record. Thank you. Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much for the answers. And then the other entities?
I believe we have UNR is here.
Yeah.
Yes, good afternoon. For the record, Scott Brown with the University of Nevada, Reno Planning and Construction Department. And for the new Nevada State Health Lab project, we retained an outside design firm, Van Wert Bugatti, who put together a pre-designed package for us. As part of that pre-design, we had developed the square footage totals for the building in working with the Nevada State Health Lab staff and other entities to come up with that total square footage. And from that, as part of the pre-design, we retained a third-party cost estimator who put together the budget numbers, and also those were reviewed with our department and the architectural firm that designed the pre-design as well. So.
Okay, and the timelines, I assume, are approximately the same because of how the funding is coming in.
Yes, for the record, Scott Brown. Yes, the timelines, we're actually ready to start design immediately. we're already ready to contract with Van Wert immediately, so we can meet those deadlines, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And this would actually be owned by NSHE then? It would be on NSHE property, and it would actually be, or is this a state-owned property? Is it a partnership with NSHE? How is it going to be viewed in the future? Is NSHE going to come forward and want to include this square footage in their operations and maintenance budget?
For the record, that might be a question for our operations on how the building is going to be maintained.
Okay.
So.
Want to assess future impacts?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and do we have anybody else? Okay. All right, any other questions, Madam Vice Chair? Do we have any other questions from the members?
Is there someone from NSHE or the state that can answer my question?
Do we have
Mr.
anyone
Chairman?
here from the state or
I don't want to put them
NSHE?
on the spot, but if they can get it to me, I would appreciate it. If you would send it to staff and they can share it with the whole committee, that would be very helpful. We just need to know how to plan. You know how we watch your budget, NG, so, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. So we'll have entry if you just provide an answer, written answer to us. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Senator Neal, do you have a question?
I'm sorry, Chair Dennis. It's just becoming, very complicated. I do have a question. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is on K, but I had a question related to the assessment. So when I looked up the calculation, I just wanted to know, just for sustainability purposes, the amount of the assessment for the 4 counties comes to about $192,000 roughly for the year. And so that gives them about $384,000 and $400,000 for the biennium. So I'm wondering, what are the other sources of money to sustain the health center for the central area for the four counties? Is it just going to be $384 every 2 years? Is that enough money to take care of it?
Julia Peak for the record for item K. Excellent question. And I'll say this group has done a phenomenal job planning. They've been working with the UNR team as well and our team. And so that funding will not make a public health agency. That funding will help support the environmental health services, disease investigation, and a little bit of clinical services as it does with DPBH. However, we're also looking at categorical grant funds that we fund the local health departments with already. And so what portion of those funds will be redirected now that the Central Nevada Health District will be providing those resources. So too, Central Nevada Health District will be a partner in applying for grants. And so as we look at new competitive opportunities to offer services, they will be going through that process with us. They also have the opportunity to apply for grants that come out for rural health districts or rural health services in that vein. So they, like us, will be going after many competitive grants, but they also will be looking at getting a portion of our categorical grants that we already have that are longstanding grants with CDC or HRSA or those type of programs. With that, I'll turn it over to County Manager Barbie if he has anything to add, but it's going to be a very similar structure to how our other health districts are funded. Shannon?
Shannon Ernst, Churchill County, Nevada. So what we have done is put together a draft budget, and we do have the fee for services for environmental health, clinical services, grants, and then the counties are paying what's called a buy-in and a cost per population fee. So at this time, we do have a draft budget to move forward as of July 1 of 2023 and to sustain this project in the future.
Jim Barbie for the record. Additionally, just to note, in the last couple of weeks, we've identified that the city of Fallon will also be joining as a municipal. And so that will help share those costs across the board.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Vice Chair Carlton, do you want to make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for approval of these items.
We have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, Senate from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion? Yes, Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am going to support this motion, but I just need to comment. Number one, thank you, Churchill County, doing an excellent job. Proud to represent you. Number two, I'm not supportive of having PLA agreements in some of these projects. I think it increases the cost to the taxpayers and limits what we could do with some of these funds. However, overall, all of these projects are very good, and I will be supporting them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the motion? Yeah, Assemblywoman Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do feel I do need to respond to my colleague that does represent Churchill County. When we build things under a project labor agreement, they usually come in on time and under cost, and time is of the essence here. We also have conversations about prevailing wage. Those are Nevadans making good wages and taking care of their families. So I don't think that should be an issue. Also, in the conversations that I had with the governor's staff, and I'd like to thank the governor for being forward thinking on this, we did look at doing this through Public Works, because you know how much I do support Public Works in the CIP project. But if we tried to do this through Public Works, we'd have to increase their staff by 30 to 50%, and I'm not sure we could get them done on time. So this is the one rare time where I believe having everybody in the state work on all these projects at the same time to get them done benefits all the families who will be able to say that they're getting a good paycheck because these projects are on the ground and being built.
Okay, any other comments on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Motion's unanimous. All right, thank you very much. We're going to go back to the top of the questions now. Try to move as quickly as we can through these. We're going to item number F1, which is the Office of the Governor, COVID relief programs. Is it Crystal? Okay. All right, I believe Ms. Abba, when you're ready, I think you're starting it off. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that Daniel Stewart from the governor's office is present in Las Vegas, and he was planning on making a few comments before we began.
Okay. Mr. Stewart, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Carlton, and the rest of the committee. I did shorten my remarks. I took the time during the lunch break to shorten them down to just a couple paragraphs, and I'm going to try to just paraphrase those for you. Really, I just want to give a background on how we got here with this, the Workforce Incentive Grant. It didn't just start. This wasn't just an ARPA idea. This originated with the work that you did in the 2021 session with the creation of the AB 455 Workforce Development Committee, which was made up of members of the community across the state and was co-chaired by the Chancellor of Higher Education and Derek Hill. About midway through there, we had the switch of chancellors, and Vice Chancellor and Chief of Staff Crystal Abba stepped up and chaired that committee and brought it home. It was a very expedited process. We started our first meetings in January and had a report due by August. And they got that done, as well as numerous recommendations. The committee also had to pivot a couple times. When it was originally created, one of the main focuses was just on community college funding, or the funding formula, things related to community college and workforce development. Then ARPA came along, and so did the governor's State of the State address in February of this year, where he made a commitment to make community college and training more affordable for more Nevadans and free for more Nevadans by 2025. And then in discussions with the committee, made a commitment to offer and make some recommendations for some art funds if they could put a plan together for that. So that's where we get the WIG grant. And from where I stand, it answers two very important needs in this community. First was, it was designed to target those that don't currently have any scholarship opportunities in the state. There are definitely holes in that system. So this would target specifically non-traditional students attending community college, only community college. They don't have to be going to school full time. They can be in a certificate course or degree, either one. And it allows them to get their tuition paid for. The second thing, and this goes to some of the conversations that this committee had early on today, was about just meeting the needs of our industries, our demand for a skilled workforce. We also did a bookend with this, that this would only apply to those taking certificate courses or degree programs or training in high demand occupations that DETR has listed as the most in demand in the state. So to hopefully partner with both, so match both the supply and demand of the workforce. We found that most of these individuals that had fallen out or were no longer eligible for some of the other scholarships were those that had been hit hardest by the pandemic. So this allowed us to do two things at once. I want to introduce and commend the work Of those that are up there in Carson City, you have Executive Vice Chancellor Crystal Abba. You have Interim Vice Chancellor for Academics and Student Affairs, Renee Davis, and Jose Quiroga, who's a research analyst in academic and student affairs. It's been great to work. The only other thing I'll say on this is just one step. You heard that earlier. There's a lot. We've got capacity issues at our community colleges that no amount of scholarship money will fix. We've got a workforce subcabinet that's working to come up with issues there, as well as wraparound services. And the AB 450 committee also has recommended a comprehensive study of the funding formula going into the next legislative session to better account for community colleges. And with that, I'll turn it over to the experts, unless anybody has any direct questions for me.
Let's go ahead and do all the other presentations, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I am Crystal Abba, Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief of Staff with the Nevada System of Higher Education. Very quickly, in regards to the comments made by the previous speaker, I want to start by thanking the Governor's Office for this opportunity, in particular for his staff. They have been incredibly supportive. As Mr. Stewart indicated, we had to pivot a number of times during this process. The original proposal was for a study, not for a pilot program. We felt very strongly that we would rather put these dollars directly in the pockets of students, particularly for those students who are facing additional economic challenges that have resulted from workplace displacement related to the pandemic. So this was a unique opportunity to create a pilot program. And one of our focuses as we worked on the development of that program was looking at the existing state-supported financial aid programs, which in many cases you have been directly involved in the creation of, which is the Governor Gwynn Millennium Scholarship, the Silver State Opportunity Grant, and the Nevada Promise Program. Those programs serve very specific populations, and each program is unique and distinct and has its own eligibility criteria. So if you look at those, there is some overlap between those programs. But as we developed this pilot, our aim was, let's look at areas where these programs are not serving certain students. So who are those students that they're not serving? But at the same time, link this pilot program to those programs that support in-demand occupations. So we spent a great deal of time culling through the in-demand occupation list that has been created by Goen. And I have with me today Jose Quiroga, who actually was the individual who combed through those. And we had a number of conversations with our presidents, because I know that there has been some concern in regards to the programs that are outlined for eligibility for this program, and making sure, because many of these are high demand, obviously, we want to make sure that we have capacity within those programs. And as such, in working with the Board of Regents, they will be considering an item that will essentially couple with this pilot program, which is an item for special consideration or an enhancement request in our biennial budget request for a workforce development and investment fund that would provide funding directly to the community colleges to build capacity, for some of these programs, but in addition to that, to provide support services so that we can make sure that these students, as they are enrolled in these programs, have the support services that are necessary to ensure the success of these programs. In addition, I'm sure one of the things going through your mind is how many students will we get to with this pilot program? As you know, the fall semester is just about to start, and financial aid for the most part has already been awarded. Those packages have been notified to students, and of course we don't have the funds in pocket now, so we are aiming to award these dollars beginning in spring of 23. Our plan is to award them in spring of 23 and then the following academic year. It is possible it will continue over into fall of 24. Looking at the program, we are anticipating we can serve anywhere between 1,250 and 2,500 students given the award level. And as Mr. Stewart indicated, as you know, we've had many conversations with the legislature over the years, particularly with respect to the Silver State Opportunity Grant, where we focused on full-time students. This program will be available to students who are enrolled part-time. Again, I want to thank you for this opportunity, any opportunity that we have to put dollars directly in the pockets of our students and at the same time support economic development opportunities for the state. We are grateful for. And so with that, I have with me, as Mr. Stewart previously introduced, Interim Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, Renee Davis, who has a background in financial aid, and I consider the subject matter expert on this, and also Mr. Quiroga. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Senator Rondero Loop, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to confirm what you just said. So we're talking about 2,000 to 2,500 students would receive these grant awards. Was that the number you said?
1,250 to 2,500.
Okay. And then what demand areas will be targeted by each institution? Or is that coming as we get into the rest of this?
For the record, Crystal Abba, in your reference material is the full proposal, and within that you have lists for each institution.
Okay.
And you'll notice the lists vary by institution because as we analyzed the Goen lists, obviously the in-demand occupations in northern Nevada vary from the in-demand occupations in southern Nevada, and also the programs that are available within those institutions. We also had the issue of limited capacity programs versus those programs that may be approaching capacity. So there is a lot of flexibility in these lists. Over time, they may be changing, and we've reserved that authority within the proposal, and we are constantly having conversations with the presidents to make sure that we have the right lists.
So we have the staffing and sort of the sustainability to do this at either end of the state. Thank you.
And that was the nod. They were nodding yes. Did you push the button? I didn't hear it.
For the record, yes, Crystal Abba.
Thank you. All right, Senator Goitia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just going to follow along with my colleague a little bit. But in the grant distribution, there is some flexibility. I look at the numbers, and you've got colleges in Southern Nevada at $3 million, and some of the smaller community colleges at $300,000 and $400,000. But let's say their program really took off, or again, as you commented, Northern Nevada, and some of these institutions have great programs. They can probably house some more students. Will you be able to shift some of those dollars?
Renee Davis, Interim Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, for the record. Yes, we, much like we did with and continue to do with the Silver State Opportunity Grant Program, we make that initial distribution and then we just watch things. And in particular, in spring of '23, we'll be watching very closely because it'll be the first time we've done it. So we'll shift as necessary where we see the demand is not being filled in one place and maybe there's higher demand in another.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you for this. I think our community colleges are definitely overlooked frequently, and it's good to be acknowledging them. However, I'm concerned about the students themselves. If you have enough interest that you would potentially have people applying, and what type of how will you engage these students, allowing them to know that it's even existing? Are you going to start in the high schools, or are you going to be reaching out? How will they know this is available? And then I have a follow-up question.
Renee Davis, Interim Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs. The beauty of this program, much like the Silver State Opportunity Grant, is the only application is the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. So we're basically going to, as long as we get students to fill out the FAFSA, which our campuses are very versed in doing, then at that point, it's our school's turn to evaluate and discover the students who have these degree programs and meet the eligibility requirements. And so it's streamlined, but on top of that, of course, now should this program be approved by this body, then we would start with the actual recruitment and outreach. And so our campuses would build that in to all the recruitment and outreach that they do in the fall semester for spring. So that would be how we'd get the word out.
So you're not looking actually at partnering with some the school districts themselves? Because many of our school districts now offer, say, an AA degree at the same time. You can do that through the school system. Have you reached out to the school superintendents or any of that about this particular program?
Renee Davis, for the record. So really the focus, because we have 3 programs in place in Nevada that focus on recent high school graduates, really the focus for this WIG is to work with students who aren't eligible for those programs. So it's still, we're not going to exclude recent high school graduates, but really the focus is going to be older students, non-traditional students, and that's where we hope to really make some gains in relationship to building the workforce and bringing folks back in who are either underemployed or not employed and those types of things. So that's going to be the focus.
And final question is, I always worry about government doing stuff that private industry should be doing themselves. And so if we're looking at producing this so that the companies that come here will have employees, are you reaching out to the individual companies to find out if they want to be partnerships with some of these costs? And if so, the students themselves, so it's really a two-part question, reaching out to corporations, are they going to be paying for some of this? And number two, is there any obligations if somebody receives these funds that they actually have to work in Nevada?
Renee Davis for the record. So in the pilot phase, we don't have plans to reach out to employers to fund any. However, our community colleges have partnerships in place with many employers, so we see that as something that we could work on for the future. So if this program were to continue beyond the pilot phase, that's something that we can start planting the seed for.
So I'm sorry, and that was part of the question, but it sounded like initially you said somebody presented that they'd reached out to industries and the programs you're going to do is what industry needs. So
Renee Davis for the record. So the programs that are proposed for each institution are based on two things. So first of all, the in-demand occupation lists established by GoEd. So we use those lists, which are regional and statewide, and then we compared those to the programs being offered at the community colleges. So that's how we chose the program. So we didn't work directly with employers. We looked at the in-demand occupations as published by the GoEd office.
And the second part to that question was, are you going to ask that they stay workers in Nevada for any amount of time?
Renee Davis for the record, there's not such a requirement with this program that the recipients stay in Nevada. However, I will say that in general, it is usually safe to assume that students who attend a community college are much more likely to stay in the region where they go to college versus, say, a university student.
Okay, we have Assemblyman Peters.
Thank you, Chair. Really impressive list here. We were just talking at the Tahoe Summit about the need for forestry service folks and some of the novel grant opportunities for those and scholarship opportunities for those students as well. So glad to see things are rounding out in other areas. I just wanted to quickly affirm that we have the administrative capacity for these grants at all of our institutions, and it doesn't appear that there's funding for the administrative tasks, but wanted to make sure that that's in the thought process and we're not leaving behind our community colleges especially.
Renee Davis, for the record, thank you very much for that question. It's something that from our position, our office, we always are thinking about the financial aid office and not adding to the burden that they have and, that they have to cover with existing staff. So at the same time, we always balance that with the desire to get as many of those dollars to students and not to carve off administrative dollars. So we run a pretty lean ship. And what we have done here is we have tried to make it as streamlined as possible. So that started with using the FAFSA to determine eligibility. It's something that each of the offices of financial aid already process and are already familiar with and already market to students. And it doesn't take the student, as I said earlier, it doesn't take the student to have a lot of knowledge about this specific one program to know they need to fill out the FAFSA. So they fill it out and then we identify them. And then the next phase is for Mr. Quiroga here to start working with the financial aid offices on a process that will, again, be as streamlined as possible. So there will be additional work, but we're trying to streamline it as much as possible. And our 4 financial aid directors at the community colleges stand ready to assist. So thank you for that question.
Senator Don Loop.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a slight note of, I think that when we say dual credit can just be got anywhere, that's not exactly accurate. And I'm hoping that when our superintendent possibly comes up in a little bit, she'll clarify that. But people have this feeling that you can just go to any high school and get dual credit. And a lot of times dual credit means that you're getting your AA degree, and you can't just go to every high school and get your AA degree. You have to be enrolled in college classes. Am I correct? So we need to be careful when we use that word. I kind of wish it was something else, but that's another bill.
I apologize for the record.
And you did not say that. You did not say that. We had
okay.
that question from the dais up here, so I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Other questions? Senator Harris.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. You all noted, I guess, about the amount of students that you might be able to help. Could you help put that in perspective with the need? So is this going to assist, 50% more students being able to afford community college? Or, is there some perspective on how big of a push is this?
For the record, Crystal Abba, when we look at each other like that, that means something. So the challenge is, as you know, our system right now serves over 100,000 students. So when you do the math, this is very, very small. However, the desire here is to prove the efficacy of the program, so ultimately you can make it bigger. So, in the vein of full disclosure, this is small. This 1,200 students relative to over 100,000 is very small. But we believe, as the governor believes, that this opportunity to bring students in where they will have no out-of-pocket expenses, and that's because we're combining this as a package with federal aid and other aid, and that's the whole kind of paradigm shift here for us. But getting it out of the chute for $5 million, it only goes so far.
Well, I appreciate that response, and $5 million is a lot more than we did yesterday. It was zero. So I'm happy to see this investment being made, and I have no doubt that it will be worth it. Thank you.
I remember a bill that Senator Harris that you brought that kind of did this. And I'm going to go to Assemblywoman Tolles in just a second. I just want to make a comment because that goes along with that. And you alluded to this. The requirement is if they have to fill out the FAFSA. And so that means that if they fill the FAFSA, they may not actually need this. Is that correct?
Renee Davis for the record. So we actually see this, unlike the Nevada Promise Scholarship, which is a last dollar, where it is kind of an either or. If you get Pell Grant, you don't usually get Promise. This is meant to be complementary. So you could get Pell Grant. We're actually targeting Pell Grant recipients, and part of the reason for that is because that's one of the affected classes in the ARP, guidelines, because you have to pick your population that you're helping. But the other part of it is back to the financial aid philosophy, which is a package of financial aid. So it's not all, ideally, sure, it would be great if we had one grant that gave, $12,000 and that, the student was good, for example. But that's not really possible in this climate. So we take the Pell Grant, and we combine it with the WIG, and maybe they'll have a scholarship, and then all of that counts towards, it'll cover tuition, registration fees and other fees, as well as books, maybe a little living expenses. That's really our goal, is to cover what we call the total cost of attendance, which includes, beyond the obvious things, living expenses. And often, when you even go into living expenses beyond that, some foregone income, because the students are in class, they can't be out working. So we have to find ways to provide more money just beyond the registration fees or the books. We have to go more if we want to get our students to be successful.
Well, and this also will incentivize individuals that perhaps didn't think they could go to college, so that it'll increase the number of workforce folks as we move forward. So.
Renee Davis for the record, absolutely.
Thank you. Let's go to Assemblywoman Tolles.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for this program and the discussion around it. We had a lot of discussions before lunch about pipeline, and in particular around mental health. And I just wondered, I just briefly pulled up the Goins list of in demand, and I saw healthcare and healthcare support, but I wonder how we can utilize this as an opportunity to build that pipeline for mental health. I know teaching, nursing, and those are not typically things that you can accomplish within just a few semesters, or even some AA degrees can get you there, but oftentimes you need a 4-year degree to get there, or bachelor's degree. So my question is twofold. One, are we prioritizing helping fill the pipeline, which we had a lot of conversations about this morning before lunch, to make sure we have people to fill those positions? And then number two, how do we continue to follow up? And I think Vice Chancellor Abba addressed this a little bit, the wraparound, to see if this could be just a stepping stone to being able to get to that bachelor's degree or master's degree level that then would be able to fill some of these higher in demand positions that we need for healthcare and the teaching profession. Thanks.
Jose Quiroga, for the record, research analyst. That is a great question. As we talk about pipeline, I did want to point out an important part of this proposal, which is that many of the occupation areas at each institution, especially those in healthcare, including nursing and emergency health services, they are in stackable credentials. So that we're building the pipeline of licensed professional nursing with a certificate degree, then going on to an associate degree and a bachelor's, so that at each step of the way, students can be either part of the workforce right away or continue the pipeline to higher levels of occupations in those areas. And specifically, as was mentioned, nursing and teaching are included in all 4 community colleges because we know that they are in-demand occupations throughout the state. And emergency medicine is included in at least 2 of the colleges. And along with that, there are individual needs at each institution, although the healthcare areas are statewide needs.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just clarify and follow up on that. I think that what stood out to me as I looked at Goins' list is I did not specifically see anything that helps build the pipeline for mental health. And as we had that discussion this morning, we can fund positions, but if we can't fill them, they're not going to actually help the people who need the help. So maybe it's more of a comment than a question, but I've read a lot of these reports over the years, and I do think part of that crisis is that we don't target recruiting. And I know we have a lot of needs, but we often leave mental health off. And until we start having that conversation and continuing to put that out there, I'm afraid we're going to continue to have these pipeline issues down the road. That's all.
Thank you for the record, Crystal Abba. I mean, you're spot on. The challenge that we have is that this program is for community colleges, and many of those mental health positions require award levels that are higher than the associates, higher than a certificate. However, as Mr. Quiroga indicated, some of these within nursing, they're stackable. So you're getting that start at the community college and then moving on to a university where those programs are available. Now, that said, I cannot imagine that after this discussion and the mental health crisis that this state is facing, this is going to be an ongoing discussion for our institutions. It is already a discussion for our board relative to how our own faculty, staff, and students are suffering in the realm of mental health. So your point is very well taken. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Madam Vice Chair, do you have a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we process these items. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion from Assemblywoman Carlton. We have a second from Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Okay, motion passes. All right, we are going to go. The next one is 2 and 3. Just going to make a comment before we start. We have 17 items left. If we spend 10 minutes each, we will finish all these items at 6:30 when we start, and still have public comment and all the other reports. So just keep in mind as you ask questions, if you can take it offline or whatever, that would help us be able to get done. So let's go. And as we do presentations, also keep in mind that we gotta, I know some of our folks will get antsy if we're not done by a certain time tonight so that they can get home. But so welcome. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. For the record, Dr. Pitlock again. Nice to see everyone again. So at the chair's pleasure, would you prefer an intro or would you like to go straight to questions? This really is a continuation of conversation that we had earlier this morning.
Okay, if that's the case, we could go to the questions.
It's your pleasure.
Hold on one second. 2, 3. Why don't we let's go to the questions, and if it looks like having you do a presentation would answer faster, we'll do that. But we'll start with Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your patience for this nice long meeting today. So as you said, this goes hand in hand with the conversations that we've had today. We focused a lot on children's mental health and child welfare. So when we look at the occupancy levels, the average occupancy, oh my goodness, I can't speak, has been just 15 youth per month over the last 3 fiscal years. So could you just explain a little bit of why you're requesting the hardening for the additional spaces now at Desert Willow Treatment Center? Because I know it goes hand in hand with conversations we had earlier.
Thank you for the question, Dr. Jacqueline Wade, Deputy.
Pull that mic down just a little so we can hear you there.
Thank you for the question. Good afternoon, Chair. Dr. Jacqueline Wade for the record. Regarding the question, I think it was 2017, the legislative session, we had reduced numbers, and in 2019, we increased beds. However, with the increase of those beds, we inherited youth that would be diverted from the JJ facilities, which increased a level of complexity with regard to an outward expression of emotions, which resulted in high acuity levels, aggression, staff injuries. And so the acuity level has been so high that the staffing ratios had to be kept adequate so that the youth that were in the hospital could be safe and monitored adequately. So that's why the numbers have been kept to a minimum so that we can provide safety within the hospital.
Thank you so much for that answer. So if I understand it correctly, you have 50 beds that we could be utilizing if we had the staffing to accommodate that. Do you have an estimated cost of what it would cost us to have all the positions filled so that we could operate all the 50 beds?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to allow Katrina Nelson to respond.
Thank you. This is Katrina Nielsen for the record. Are you asking whether any new positions that we would need to fully occupy? Okay.
Yeah, so what would the actual number of positions be needed to operate the 50 beds, and what would the cost of those positions be? If you know that, if you have an estimate. And if you don't, you can always send it to us.
So the number of new positions, I believe Dr. Wade can respond to.
Dr. Wade, for the record, the number of new position would be approximately, I believe, 100, because we would double the staffing ratios given the violence, because of if a youth is on suicidal watch, we'll need 1-to-1. And if the assault is up, we need 2-to-1. So what we've noticed is when the acuity is high, we actually need more staff.
Thank you for the answers, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
And in answer to your question, sorry, Katrina Nielsen for the record. So the additional cost of those positions is currently estimated at 2.9 million in fiscal year, 2.5 million in fiscal year 24, and then a 3.425 in fiscal year 25.
Thank you.
Other questions? Vice Chair Carlton.
Thank you, and as we've asked a lot of other folks, so I'm assuming that the funding for this, moving forward through the 23 and possibly the 25 session, if you can find the personnel, this will all be included in budget enhancements in the future to address the ongoing costs, because what you're talking about here is just immediate. So there is a long-term plan.
For the record, Katrina Nielsen, yes, the positions, this is only to establish the funding to harden the facility, and the positions will follow because it's going to take time for us to undergo the construction project, and so the positions will follow in fiscal year 24 and 25.
Okay, thank you. And when you say hardening, when we think of hardening in the Department of Corrections world, it's actual bars, things like that. What you're talking about as far as hardening is more like patient proofing is what I call it. It's to provide for the safety of the patients and the safety of the staff so that the facilities are a little more secure. It's not about turning it into a prison.
Dr. Jacqueline Wade, for the record, that is correct.
Good, thank you. We don't want these kids in a prison. Thank you very much.
Other questions? If not, Vice Chair Carlton.
Move for approval, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Second from motion by Vice Chair Carlton, second by Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Okay, the motion carries. We'll now go to item, thank you very much. We'll go to item number 4 and 5. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Carlton. For the record, my name is Joan Ebert. I'm honored to serve as your State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Really briefly, first, I want to thank all of you for all the work that you have done today and that you continue to do for our state each and every day. A lot of the work that we do in the Department of Education was approved through many of the programs that you have already approved this morning, so thank you. For this work program this afternoon, too, thank you for your prior approval for 100 mental health professionals across our state during the crisis. You approved both through the ESSER $2 as well as the governor's education dollars to provide those resources. I did have the opportunity to speak with Superintendent Wayne Workman this morning, who, I'm coming today, want to make sure everything's going well. Are you happy? And he said, Joan, we would not be able to do our work without these dollars that were allocated prior. And so he, too, is looking, hopefully, for the extension of these dollars moving forward. We have 6 school districts that have been funded, 14 charter schools that have been funded. The funds were made available just in January to Senator Gokachia's comment earlier today. When you're ramping up a project and a program, especially hiring people, this was a competitive grant. It wasn't authorized until January of this year. So we just got our dollars flowing, moving. Everyone is now being hired and is in place for this school year. We're very excited and would like to continue the grant. The only other thing that I'd like to add this afternoon is that prior to the pandemic, I have an amazing colleague in Director McGill, who's sitting to my left. She actually applied for workforce development in mental health, a grant, a federal grant, which our state received over 2 years ago, $10 million to make sure that we built our own pipeline here in Nevada for mental health professionals. So we work collaboratively with UNR. They currently have placements in Washoe County School District as well as Churchill County School District. And the goal there is to build our own. So as they're going through their program, they see how working within our school district, success with our children, supporting them, and that they will continue once they earn their license and continue to work in our schools. So with that, we stand ready to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Carlton is going to start us off.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And we realize what an important program this is. That way, we felt it was very worthwhile. So when we finished up our budgets and put the dollars into this, we were very hopeful to see these dollars out there and going. In the documents that I have in front of me, less than 5% of the current available funding has actually been reimbursed, and I don't think that gives us a real picture of what's going on yet. I think we should get more data before we put more money in. If the amount of money that's only been spent, according to what I've got in front of me, is a little over $300,000 as of right now. Now, if that's not the most current number, if you'd like to give us the most current number, that would be fine too. But I really feel that we should see, we've heard all the conversations about being able to get these professionals. How are these programs going to roll out? Should we really take a look at what the school districts are doing with these dollars before we put more money in? So with the small amount of dollars that have actually been used, I would be concerned about putting money in now. I think I would be more comfortable, possibly in October, because I think we'll have more information in October to see exactly how these dollars are being spent and what's being done. So if you could just address the 4.2% of the dollars only being spent so far, and if that's not correct, if you would update us.
Heidi Hartz, for the record, I serve as the Deputy Superintendent for the Student Investment Division. According to our reports as of August 16th, we have reimbursed school districts for approximately $1.2 million worth of expenses related to this subgrant. And we believe that there's approximately another $600,000 already owed to school districts. Just this part for fiscal year 22 and the first month of fiscal year 2023. That expenditure pattern is probably in alignment with what we would have expected for subgrants that became effective in January, understanding that school districts needed to recruit and hire staff. We are hopeful through the addition of the dollars included in today's work program that school districts will have confidence when they reach out and continue their recruitment efforts, whether they're looking to hire district staff or contract with providers, so that the employees who are hired or contracted have some level of certainty about the continuity of their employment through the duration of time that these funds are available.
And thank you, Ms. Hartz. We appreciate that, because we know sometimes when work programs get sent in, there is a lag time. So if I'm just doing basic cursory, waitress back of the book math here, there's still $5 million, possibly just a little bit under $5 million if we take into consideration any requests that you have in the queue right now. So, Mr. Chairman, I would say that I think I would be more comfortable getting more information on this one and being able to have a little bit closer look at it, and possibly asking them to bring it back in October so that we can see the real expenditures at this time before we put more dollars into it, knowing that these unexpended dollars will probably balance forward, so we do have an opportunity to put more money into this. But I think I'd like a little more information before we actually add more money to something that already has $5 million in it.
Okay, and I was going to do a follow-up. So talk a little bit about that. So you've got $7 million now. You're asking for additional $4 million, right? Is that the more or less? Why are you asking for this $4 million when you're not going to expend this $7 million anytime in the near future? So if you could talk about, what would happen if we don't approve this today and put it off?
Bailey Bordelin for the record. Thank you. I think the team can add to this, but one thing I wanted to make sure we got on the record is that That's actually where this conversation started. The governor's office reached out to NDE and asked about these dollars and how they were working and if they were being effective. And one of the things that we were told very eloquently by our team that I'm sure they can say better than I can say is that there's a reluctance to take these jobs because there's short-term funding and because when they look at the job, it is running out. It's been difficult to staff them for that reason of getting school social workers right now. It's a very difficult time to be a mental health professional in our schools. And then to see that as such a short-term job opportunity is not encouraging to getting them filled. And so by extending the funding, because we know that there is a need for these mental health professionals in our schools right now, the hope is that that will help us fill them and continue these positions throughout this time. So I will let them add that, but I wanted to say that's a great question, Assemblywoman, and that's the question that we started with. And what we learned is that the short-term nature of the funding is part of the problem. And so this will extend that investment in a way that will allow our mental health professionals to take the jobs.
If I may, Ms. Bordelin, so we started with $7.5 million, and you're requesting another 4. There's 5 left. That's not short-term in my mind. So I'm wondering if there's another issue out there other than just the dollars. Is it just workforce? And is putting money in it going to actually solve it when there's already $5 million sitting there waiting to be used and they're asking for another 4, so that's going to be 9. They started with 7, so I'm just trying to figure out how putting more money in it is going to incentivize anything when they started with more than what they're asking for and it's still not being used. So I'm not really sure of that, and maybe I just don't understand the intricacies of it all, but not having all the data, it seems to me there's another issue here, and it's not just the money, and I'd like to know what the other issue is also besides putting the money into the program. But thank you for the explanation.
I think I think somebody else was going to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. And to the question for Vice Chair, absolutely, when you look at the total amount, the 7.5, we did have to do the competitive grant process, so the funds were not made available until January. These funds do expire 1 year from the upcoming month. So these funds cannot roll forward. They must be expended by September of 2023. What the ask is to continue so that there is a long-term plan, right? We're strategic. We will expend these dollars that we have now, and we're more than happy to provide updated reports as well. Will be expended this year, fully expended by the deadline of September 2023. And the additional 4, we didn't come and ask for an additional 7.5, which I know the school districts could use. But we see an off-ramp that, and you approved earlier today with the Medicaid billing, as we are able to do more billing within our schools, those funds then can be used for those staff members to be hired. And so we see it as a ramp down of the program as the school districts are able to become self-sufficient. So there's no overlap of the dollars. It is the 7.5 will be expended by September 2023. The additional $4 million will take us out through September of 2024, where the school districts will then continue to fund those positions.
Okay. Yeah, Senator, go get you.
Yeah, just quick, and maybe we can lay this to rest. Are you having any trouble hiring the positions or the districts? Is it also a labor shortage?
In some of our districts, yes, but not all. So it varies on the school district. And specifically for those school districts where they would find some candidates in being able to do the job offer to make sure that that job is there beyond a short-term period, that is where they've been bumping up against the issue.
Thank you. So you're saying you are able to hire these people, you just need to make sure that you can hire them long-term.
people like to know that they are being hired for a long-term job. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Superintendent
Chair.
Ebert, for the record.
Okay, other questions? Yeah, Senator, let's see, Benitez Thompson, and then we'll go to Titus.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit inarticulately, and I wish we had a school that might be available, and I don't know if there's one out there that might be available and listening that could help us kind of flow through how these dollars move more. There's at least one of these schools who's listed that has money that I've worked with, and that it seems to me that it's more of a timing thing. So that was a competitive grant, applied last winter, got noticed a few months later. By that point, you're at the end of the school year, so then you were not in the budgets that had to be approved over the summer. May or may not have been able to include that money in. At least in more recent meetings, you can include those dollars in because you know you've got them, but you're also braiding them with other dollars as well. And at least this school's one specific situation, it was contracting for these services to come in. And so it's going to be one lump sum of a receipt that gets submitted to the department for reimbursement. So I guess a part of me is feeling like it's a flow issue. I'm feeling that. I don't know how to articulate it very well. I wish if there were some schools out there who could talk a little bit more of that timeline, because it is tricky. And those winter grants are tricky because you're winding down one budget and then at the same time approving tentative budgets for the next year. So I guess I'm just trying to say, like, it feels like there's going to be a big receipts coming in, and your grant people who review those receipts are going to be sending out dollars like in bigger chunks coming up. But that would be my assumption. But I think to the point of Assemblywoman Carlton saying, is that true? Are you expecting to get hit with a bunch of requests soon? And you're like, hold tight, these dollars are going to be, we know they're flying out, and we can get you an update, over the next couple weeks. They're coming, and it's just kind of a lag. That's what I feel like, but tell me if that's what's happening on the ground. It feels like that's what's happening on the ground.
Christy McGill for the record, and thank you for your question. Yes, flow is part of the equation. Having winter grants is always problematic, especially when you're hiring personnel in the schools and contracts and all that stuff. And then the other piece as well is that we will be checking with districts. This was a competitive grant. We'll be checking in September to see how they're doing. If a specific district tells us, we're having some workforce, we can't find anyone, we will then look at reallocating those funds to districts who are not having those issues. So our goal is to really make sure that the professionals get into the schools and having that flexibility of really where we can apply the funds to move it forward.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Also a process question. It seems like there is such a delay, and for the licensure of these mental health professionals for the schools, does the school districts advertise the need? The school district hires them, but who licensed them? And is there any hiccup along that way of delay in licensure? How does the process work? Does the Department of Ed license them?
Christy McGill for the record. It really depends upon the license. So like a licensed clinical social worker is both by their board of examiners and also through the Department of Education. So we haven't had too many hiccups because the need in our schools is so great. Whatever the lowest license is as that person is moving forward, say an intern, we have different scopes of work to apply to those qualification levels, if that makes sense. So anywhere from a community health worker that can help, families get onto Medicaid and negotiate food benefits, all the way up to licensed clinical social workers, which is duly licensed.
And the reason I bring this question up, I've had somebody reach out to me that lives in my district who tried to get who was a retired teacher, previous associate principal type of thing, couldn't get a substitute license through the state of Nevada. It's been delayed, and now they won't reimburse him for his application fee. So I'm just wondering if there's a bigger problem here than we're seeing, that there's this money hasn't been spent because there's delays that we are not seeing. And what is going on in the Department of Ed? Is there a process problem here? Because we desperately need teachers, and he couldn't get his license. And I'm just very concerned, and sets up red flags for me across the board.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, so for teacher licensing, I can tell you that for the last 2 months, we've processed almost 4,000 licenses. More than happy to help this person offline to see what is transpiring. The team was working 7 days a week right before school started, and have been working very closely with schools and school districts. So would love to assist if there's
and we will
one
take it
out there.
offline, but for me, it was all process across the board. Maybe there's a backlog, and is it at the district level, or is it at the state level of processing these? And I was worried that it was the same thing with these mental providers, that you weren't able to process them in a timely manner. It sounds like if you had 7,000 applications, you said, how many? 7,000?
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, for over the last 2 months, we processed for about 4,000 records.
Okay, and so there's the background checks and all those.
Yes.
So it may just be a log issue. And we'll chat about it anyway, but I just want to make sure that's not connected, that you aren't able or have the staffing to get the people licensed that need to be licensed in a timely manner.
Okay, other questions? I'm not hearing any. I think what we should do, let's bring this back in October. Let's give, you'll have any of the reports you got coming in September. It'll help to, I think you understand what the issues are, at least the concerns. Really, at the end of the day, we have to make the decision, is this how we want to spend these dollars? And do we want to tie them up where we could use them somewhere else? And so we just need you to come back and show us how doing the additional $4 million is going to really help us. Because I think everybody here supports having these professionals in the schools, because that's what we need. But I think we still have a little bit of time, especially since the deadline on this $4 million is a year out further. So if you could do that, that would be great. Thank you very much. Do we need a motion? Do we need a motion on this?
I think you can probably just skip it. I mean, you can take a motion and not approve it, or just.
It should be not approved.
No, I just say we don't do anything and then just let them come back.
We have to do something.
We don't have to do anything, no.
Well, no, you're right, because the 45-day will expire if you don't do anything.
Because we're not going to meet before 45 days.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so we do need to do a motion on this so we could bring it back in October. Otherwise, we'll have an issue with the timing. Madam Vice Chair, you want to make a motion?
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's not that we're going to say a motion not to approve, but that's just because it's the technical term. I do support this. I just want more data and want to understand to bring it back. So my motion would be to not approve this item and ask them to return in October to share with us more information so that we can make a more informed decision. So that would be my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we have a motion. Senator Camizaro, do you want to second that? So we have a second. Discussion. Once again, this isn't a rejection. It's something that we have to do so that we can bring this back in October and have this discussion. Senator Goicoechea.
Just a comment, yes. I would definitely support moving it today, though I do believe that we need that personnel in the schools more now than ever. So either way, I would prefer to move it today, though.
Thank you. Any other? Senator Dondarelu.
I would agree with my colleague. I respectfully understand the delaying it and having more information, but I think we're in a situation where we need to have these things in place so that they can move forward. And if we wait until October, now 2 more months behind, and then if there's something that's not there, we could be we could be into session in 30 seconds. And I just feel like the budget that they're asking for is what we're doing this so that we can put mental health support in place. And I guess I just feel strongly about that with our schools.
Danielle, some of them, and Danielle Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear what's being said. However, I feel that there's $5 million left that hasn't been utilized yet. We're not saying the program can't move forward. The program is going to move forward. There is money there sitting, waiting for the program to move forward. We're asking to delay it so that they do reimburse. I think there's more to the story that just didn't come out here, and we need to hear what that is before we put more money into a program that isn't working to the level of the capabilities that I believe it can work. But the funding is there. It doesn't impact anyone getting employed. It doesn't impact bringing people on. There's $5 million sitting there to bring people in to be reimbursed, right? That money is there. This would be an additional money that would be added to it, in approximately 6 to 8 weeks. We'll be back here to give that money out if they've utilized what they already have. But it just doesn't make sense to give more money to sit and waiting if we haven't really addressed what the problem is of why that money is waiting. Does that make sense?
Senator Gokichia.
Thank you for a second time, and I want to get out of here as bad as anybody does. But clearly, I feel that, school is starting right now, and if we delay it another couple months, and if that stops even one person from actually applying and taking a job in the system, it's critical. We can't fill these needs. So if someone's waiting in the wings trying to find out if they're going to have a job in 24, and they determine, well, by our hesitancy, we didn't fund it, okay, that might mean the job's not going to be in place beyond next year. So again, when we have issues like we saw in Uvalde, and I don't blame the AK-47 there, it's a fact we didn't have staff in those schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? I don't believe that, I'm okay with waiting till October. I don't know that I would want to delay more than that. I really don't see anything that's going to slow down or because we didn't do this. I think that the support is there to do that. We just had some questions, I think is really what it's come down to. Senator Camizaro. No. Okay, other comments? Okay, I will call for the motion. Those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. We're going to go to items 6 and 7.
Chair
afternoon.
Brooks
Go ahead.
and members of the committee, again, Cindy Pitlock, excuse me, for the record. So continuing the conversation from this morning, what this represents is temporary staffing for us to continue services at Oasis Psychiatric Residential Treatment Center. We have already issued an RFP to go out to bid for taking those services over by a contract provider. But until then, we need to continue services and be fully open to provide services for those youth. And that is what this amount represents. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions? Senator Harris, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Dennis. Just two quick questions. Could you explain why you chose to use ARPA funds for these temporary positions as opposed to your anticipated vacancy savings in the budget, given the high level of vacancy rates?
Thank you for the question, Senator Harris. Katrina Nielsen for the record. So we were open to either requesting to transfer authority from our existing personnel services category or requesting ARPA, and it was the governor's office decision to request the ARPA funding.
Okay, thank you. Given the workforce challenges that we've been discussing essentially all day, does the agency believe that there's a pool of qualified candidates able to be hired for these temporary staff at the Oasis campus?
For the record, Dr. Pitlock, Senator Harris, thank you for the question. So we have found greater success, frankly, in going through our contract staffing company than we have trying to recruit these positions through the state process. And because it is a temporary bridge until the RFP is completed and we award those services and we have that successful overlap of transitioning a new vendor into that area, it would seem that temporary staffing would be the logical choice versus trying to hire and retain people in state positions that then we would have to shuffle somewhere else in 5 to 6 months period of time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Other questions? Vice Chair Carlton.
Thank you very much. So with the vacancy savings that you do have, we do see a number of times where agencies come to us and ask to use vacancy savings for other projects. Is that in your mind? Do you have plans for those vacancy savings in anywhere? Or did you just see that using the ARPA money here, since it's one-time money, was a better use?
Katrina Nielsen for the record. Thank you for the question. It was seen as a better use of the funding. It is not the intent that we saved the personal services category funding for another purpose.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, other questions? Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move for approval.
A motion to approve, second, Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. All right, we're going to now, thank you very much. We're going to go to item numbers 8, 9. And I believe this was a request from one of our members, so I don't know. Senator Neal, I believe you asked this. You asked to pull this one.
I didn't ask for 8 and 9. I asked for G.
Oh, sorry. So who had 8 and 9? Oh, Assemblywoman Titus.
If we can go right to the question, I think that will
we're going straight
so
to the.
I had questions about the reimbursement and the transfer of these funds to the PEB benefit program for the reimbursement of these testing, because that's what this is. And these were the at-home test kits. There's been a lot of questions and concerns over these at-home test kits and the how accurate they were. And I was just concerned if there's any going after the company themselves that sold them to the state. Were any of the kits that were not accurate part of this reimbursement? And I'm wondering if they have any accountability on these funding.
Thank you for your question. This is Carrie Eaton. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for PEB. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any concerns about the accuracy of the test. So no, we don't have any information on that. We entered into an agreement through our TPA to receive the at-home tests and paid for them through our claims costs. And this is reimbursement of our actual costs.
So you have actually already spent this money to these companies?
Yes.
Okay.
Carrie Eaton for the record.
Thank you. And I'd appreciate maybe a follow-up so we don't belabor this, that you might follow through on that to see if many of the kits were inaccurate. And so I'm just curious about that. And we might be able to have an answer here. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. If you'll indulge me, Dwayne Young from the Office of the Governor. Thank you, Carrie. Carrie is the CFO for PEB. Director Rich is on a well-deserved vacation, and she's halfway across the country. So I did want to clarify, because I've worked with Director Rich and Carrie and their organization on this project. This was implemented through PEB as a means for employees who had not been vaccinated initially to test themselves. It was also expanded to, as we know, those who have been vaccinated with the new variants of COVID have been receiving COVID as well. And so it was expanded to other employees. It was proposed that a surcharge would be implemented, but we reached a vaccination threshold. We saw costs begin to go down. And we saw employees being able to turn to work. PEB then removed that surcharge or that implementation of a future surcharge. And so we are using these ARP funds to pay for those at-home tests that have been distributed to employees. There has been, I think, some conflation with the at-home test as well as some other testing sites that were licensed by Healthcare Quality and Compliance. That is a separate issue. These tests are from approved vendors that were done through an RFP that are also being used by the federal government. I keep a stack in my office. I keep a stack in my home. So wherever the exposure has occurred, I can test myself and be aware and keep my fellow employees safe. And that is what we have asked state employees to do with these tests. And so that they do not have to bear the cost in PEB or through their premiums through PEB, we're requesting ARP funds to reimburse PEB for the cost of these tests.
If that actually answers my question, because I really was concerned about the number one accuracy, getting paid for that, and at the same time, we're charging our employees these surcharges. So thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Any other questions? Since you pulled this,
We'll move to approve 8 and 9.
Okay, we have a motion from Senator Titus, second from Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion. All in favor say aye. Oh, hold on one second. Yes, we're doing 8 and 9. Correct, sorry. Just so we're clear on the motion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, we are now on to 10 and 11. And this also was a similar Titus.
Yeah, thank you. Just go right to my question and my concern. I love to fish, and I love to keep fish alive, and I love fish hatcheries. But I also pay a fishing license and to keep these fishing going. And I'm very concerned, and I do not support using ARPA funds for this particular program. I think when we have we can't fill employee slots, and our highway patrolmen, we hear that aren't being reimbursed. People are leaving the state, retiring. That to put this in $3 million when we should be using sportsman's dollars, and that's probably the only time you'll ever hear me say we should be using sportsman's dollars, because I frequently will object to using sportsman's dollars. But I have a hard time using ARPA funds for this particular issue.
Do we have anybody?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Tony Wassley, Director for Department of Wildlife.
Yes, go ahead.
I'd just like to offer a little agency perspective, if I may. The situation at the Lake Mead hatchery. The Lake Mead hatchery was refurbished back in, I think it was 2006, and originally produced cold water fish trout in particular. As the lake level receded, the water temperatures became unsuitable for cold water species. Then aquatic invasive species and quagga mussels further complicated the production of those cold water fish species that couldn't be transplanted into other waters. The combination of those two factors resulted in a repurposing of the hatchery. Presently, the hatchery, well, up until January of this year anyway, the hatchery was providing mitigation that is required for the operation of Hoover Dam. And the mitigation was for razorback suckers and bony-tailed chub, which are federally listed species. And the only production of those species was occurring at the Lake Mead hatchery. The Lake Mead hatchery was receiving its water supply from Basic Water in Henderson until that intake was drought affected and was no longer able to provide water to the hatchery. So this last January, all of those federally listed species were removed from the station because we didn't have water per se. The Bureau of Reclamation has been the primary funder of all the operations of that hatchery in assisting us in providing the mitigation as required to operate that dam and pound the water, generate power for 40 million people downstream. What this project is requesting is 3.1 million in those ARPA funds to augment an existing 8.9 million that's being provided by the Bureau of Reclamation to provide a replacement water supply line that would be below current lake levels to allow us to continue to provide mitigation for those federally listed species and continue to impound water and generate electricity. So the total project cost is about $12 million to replace the existing pipeline that's currently above water level to have a suitable water level, suitable water source to produce those federally listed species. This is not a novel use of the water. It's raw water that would just be directed into the hatchery for the purpose of producing those federally listed species and then return immediately to the lake. So it wouldn't affect available water. It wouldn't impact storage levels other than to prove the mitigation necessary for razorback suckers and bony-tailed chub. The Bureau of Reclamation already provides the bulk of the funding for the operation of the hatchery in conjunction with other federal funds coming from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Section 6, with a very small portion of general fund to that cause as well.
So Director Wassley, I understand the project and I absolutely support the project. I don't support using ARPA funds for this project. And I know you reiterated, I've done my homework on the project and what you intend to do with the fish. I know what the fish look like and what you're trying to do with the freshwater, et cetera. I just cannot accept using ARPA funds for this particular reason. I think there's other funds out there, and I think we have to, I think there's other priorities. We've listed an incredible amount of other priorities today. And so for me, as a person who supports wildlife, certainly have donated my monies to wildlife, I just can't support this use of this funds for this project. Thank you.
Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up, Director Wassley, could you explain a little bit more what the consequences would be if we were not to allocate funds to this project now and waited to go through the budgeting process during the regular session?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman Watts. So as I indicated, the federally listed species that were being produced on the hatchery were removed, were taken off station in January due to insufficient water. We have a hatchery that is ironically without fish right now. There is no water for that hatchery. The mitigation requirement under that multi-species conservation plan requires certain measures. The only reproduction that is occurring in razorback suckers and bony-tailed chub was occurring on that station. Those species are functionally extinct. And so as a requirement to operate that dam, impound the water, generate the electricity that impacts, I think 7 states and 40 million people, there must be some mitigation. If this source of funding is denied or it's determined that other avenues be used, I don't know specifically what the impacts would be, but I can tell you without water, we're not going to be able to rear those fish and provide the mitigation as required by that operating agreement. So I think that perhaps folks that might be better suited to answer the specific impacts, might be Southern Nevada Water Authority or Bureau of Reclamation. I know that the longer we go without water, the longer we go without fish, the more we prolong our commitments in providing that mitigation for those federally listed species.
Thank you very much for that, Director. And we've seen in the news as recently as yesterday the dire condition that the Colorado River is in, which, as you noted, is supplying 40 million people in 7 states, I think 30 tribal nations, and the nation of Mexico. And this is, as you noted, not the only issue related to providing power from those dams and providing water to all the different entities, but it definitely is a factor in it. I had the chance to go to the opening of your visitor center at the fishery. It's gorgeous. I'm excited that we have the opportunity to do some additional improvements while the water is out of there. But I want that to be a functioning fishery, and I'm really concerned with some of the potential cascading impacts if we're not able to kind of treat this as the emergency situation that it is. I've talked with other members of this body about wanting to make investments with these funds wherever possible in our water resources. I think that's a goal that some of us share. And to me, this has kind of risen to the top as something that we do need to address immediately and utilize some of these funds to make sure we can get this fishery back up online as soon as possible. So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Goicoechea.
Yes, I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to establish on the record, Mr. Walsley, but this request is directly driven by the drought. It's a consequence of the drought, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. I just want to make sure to get that on the record. There's been some dialogue that drought didn't qualify for ARPA funds. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Hafen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director, for being here. And I appreciate my colleagues bringing up, SNWA and everything that Nevada has done during this drought. I'm a little disappointed in the other states that have not done the extent that Nevada has done. And Nevada continues to be at the forefront of conservation. I mean, last legislative session, I believe we were requiring removal of turf. And so now we're back at the table to do more for a federally protected animal. And I'm not opposed to doing that. But I would ask that if we move forward with this, that some sort of letter go out asking the other states to step up and at least get into the negotiations to try to address the drought concerns and the Lake Mead levels when Nevada is clearly going above and beyond.
Yeah, I don't think we want to get into that. That's a whole other issue. Not that we necessarily disagree that something needs to happen there, but definitely. Any other questions?
Then, Mr. Chair, if I may, I would just say that I would like to support SNWA's efforts in addressing the concerns with Lake Mead, because I do believe that Nevada has been at the forefront in this, and I do believe that it's time for other states to help out.
Thank you. Yes, so Woman Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a kind of a real dilemma. You know, my district is urban and rural, and I feel like I'm having to pick fish over farmers and ranchers because certainly under the drought conditions and under inflation, our farmers and ranchers are being hit really hard, and there's no money from the COVID funds for relief for them. So I'm at a loss here, but just wanted to kind of put on the record that this is the hard part, having to pick and choose. I know we're concerned about drought, but I read an article recently that now California is worried about mega floods. So, you know, we live in cyclical climates. This is what we sometimes have to deal with. So I don't think that I can support this at this time just because I'm having to choose between farmers and ranchers over fish. And so thank you for the indulgence.
Thank you. I just want to make the comment that, you know, this is really something that impacts all of us. I think it's something that we need to take care of, something that we had, we've made an agreement as part of our agreement with Hoover Dam and all of that. I think that, we could either use ARPA funds or we can take funds from something else. But I don't know what that something else would be. If we have the opportunity to do this, and we can do this now, I think it's very important. So I think it's something that needs to be done. And I don't think this pits farmers against fishermen or anything like that. I think this is more of a water resource issue that impacts all of Nevada. Other questions, comments? Madam Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval.
We have a motion to approve. Second, Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion? Yes, Senator Gokachia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting this measure, and clearly, again, I was just trying to establish that it was drought related, and hopefully we can take that up in the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Okay, so we've got Assemblywoman Titus is a nay and Assemblywoman Hanson. Anyone else that I'm missing? Okay, the motion passes. We'll now go to item number 23. Who pulled that one? Let's see, do I have that? Yeah. That's one that, is anybody gonna, yes, Assemblywoman Titus.
Thanks. I'm sorry to belabor this. I know everybody wants to get out of here, but we're accountable for these monies. So I was wondering what the campaign was going to look like in this array of RX prescription card program. And so is it a state-funded thing or something we're working with the pharmaceutical companies? I just need a little bit more information on it.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. My name is Shannon Litz. I'm a public information officer with the Director's Office of the Department of Health and Human Services. So earlier this year, Nevada did join with Oregon and Washington on this initiative, and we are working to enroll Nevada pharmacies to prepare for Nevadans to be able to sign up later this year. The card will be available to all Nevadans, and this work program will be used to develop a campaign in English and Spanish to let people know that they can enroll for free for this card that will help with the cost of their prescription drugs.
Thank you for that. That's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions?
I'll move to approve if there's no other questions.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Second, Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, we're going to go to number 32. Who had a question on 32? Assemblyman Titus, I think this is another one you pulled.
Actually, this is Assemblyman Hafen also wanted this one pulled. We were just concerned about if they could assure us that this new program would help limit the amount of fraud that we saw and abuse of the program before.
Good afternoon. This is Elisa Cafaretta with the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. And yes, I would be happy to answer this question. Want to let you know, one, that we have implemented several measures since the beginning of the pandemic to reduce fraud and fraudulent claims in our existing system, and in the requirements that we put in place for the modernization, we included several requirements that would make it easier for us to work with clients, help them process a claim as needed, verify identification throughout the process using a whole array of resources that are now available. So that fraud protection is part of the request and will be built into the new system.
Thank you. We'll also expedite the process. And at the same time, when you answer that, can you tell me what the waiting time is now for these claims?
Sure. Elisa Cafaretta with Dieter. So the whole system, the requirements that we've asked the vendor to respond to is designed to, yes, help streamline the process for claimants to make it a lot easier to get from the beginning to the end. And provide more explanation so that it's easier for them to understand what's being requested. One of the other things that we saw during the pandemic was Congress implemented a whole series of additional and new programs to respond to the crisis. Each one of those had to be built into our systems, or we had to get a new vendor. So we've asked that the new system be very adaptable and very agile, so we can respond to any changes in the federal programming, because that's what we're implementing is the federal program. So we're designing a system that will be able to scale up quickly and to respond and be more flexible as needed, because we think that that will always be something we'll see in the future. The backlog right now that we have in, so the pandemic unemployment assistance, we are just hearing the final appeals in that program in the next couple of months. So we will hopefully be completely done with that program by the end of the year, or very beginning of next year. And then we do, because of the loss of staff that we've talked about several times with this committee, we do have a bit of a backlog in regular adjudications for regular unemployment. And we hope you'll pass on to your constituents that it's really important that they file a claim that doesn't have issues that would delay their payments. So the number one issue that we're seeing is when people get a separation pay when they are laid off from their job. It's the best thing for them to do is to, if they get 2 weeks of vacation, to wait those 2 weeks and then file their claim so they don't need to report that separation pay. That's probably the number one issue that's delaying payments for folks right now.
Well, and thank you for that final question. Will they be able to access this on their phones?
Yes, we did. The modernization requirements also include mobile accessibility. You can access the current UI program on your phone, but it's not ideal. But going forward, yes, we're trying to make all of our phones, all of our programs mobile friendly.
Thank you. Assemblyman Hanson, do you have any further follow-up? Not Hanson. Who was it? Hafen. See you shaking your head, so, okay. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Senator Tatro.
Thanks, and sorry, I'll be quick. But and if you can't answer, I was just checking in. I asked a few meetings ago about what's being done about the fraud that was committed, and if there's anything being done to retroactively go after those who defrauded the system. Thanks.
Elisa Caffaretta for the record. Yes, we continue to investigate. We're working with law enforcement at various levels, local, state, and federal, to investigate claims. We do have a report that we can give you that sort of gives you the updated number of prosecutions that have occurred and seizures that have happened, which we sort of can provide to you on a quarterly basis, so we can show you what's happening. As you know, if there's a law enforcement investigation, this can take, depending on how complex the case is, can take months, and even in some cases we're expecting years. So we expect that we'll be continuing to see these investigations and prosecutions for several years going forward. So that is an ongoing part of our work.
Great. That sounds like a great update since last time, and I'd love to see that. Thank you.
Thanks. Assemblywoman Titus, do you want to make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be happy to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve, second from Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay. Okay, now we're on number 54. Who has a question? Who had a question on that one?
Oh, I did. Sorry, Mr. Chair, that was me also.
Assemblywoman Titus.
All right, so this information campaign is regarding monkeypox, and I approve of ARPA funds and this kind of funds being used for infectious disease process. And this is just one of many that we will be seeing in the future. So I'm just curious about what this information is going to look like and what targeted population are you reaching out to?
Thank you, Melissa Pikulik, Nevada City Meteorologist, for the record, and I appreciate your question. This monkeypox campaign for Nevada is specific to, although monkeypox transmission can occur among all populations, what we're seeing here nationally and in Nevada, that the gay, bisexual, and men who have sex with men community is being disproportionately affected by monkeypox. So this campaign request would be to provide messaging on risks and harm reduction strategies to mitigate those risks specific to this population. What it'll look like is we are partnering very closely with those that know this community well. This work will be done in partnership with Mr. Andre Wade and his team at Silver State of Quality, the Office of Minority Health, our local health authorities, and other community partners, because they really know these communities best and understand how to do this well and effectively and what that messaging should look like.
Thank you for that, because this cannot be ignored, and reaching out to populations that may not want to be reached out to, people that are not always active in the healthcare field or have access to healthcare. It's something that we need to make sure that we do. We've spoke many times about disparities in access to care, and I just wanted to make sure that you've aggressively identified who you're going to reach out to, make sure we're in front of this, and thank you for the information you gave. I'll move to approve it if there's no other questions.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I'll take a motion from Assemblywoman Titus, and second from Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, that finishes all of the items under F. We will now move to item number G on the agenda, and we are going to start with item number 12. And this is the Department of Administration Hearings Division.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Laura Freed. I serve as Director of...
You're very, very soft.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can turn up my... mic a little bit. Is that better?
Keep talking.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So item G12 is a request to add 2 hearings officers and 2 legal secretaries. As Mr. Mills noted in public comment many hours ago, to help us come into compliance with the statutory requirement to get hearings scheduled within 30 days after we receive a request for hearing. And I am joined in the South by Michelle Morgando, the Senior Appeals Officer in the Hearings and Appeals Division, and we are available for any of the committee's questions.
Okay, I think we have a question, Assemblywoman Howdicke.
Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Just a couple of questions. One, can you tell me what year we started falling out of compliance? When did we start going past the 30 days that's required by statute? And if this agenda item is approved, will these 4 new positions put us into compliance with NRS? And how long do you think it'll take us to get there?
Yep. Good afternoon, Michelle Morgando, Senior Appeals Officer with Hearings and Appeals. We started to fall out of compliance significantly in fiscal year 20, and 21 and 22 proved to be our most challenging years. Obviously, in particularly 20 and 21, COVID-related concerns, office closures, staff being unavailable, including the hearing officers and their support staff. And in fiscal year 15, we were at 99.4% compliance. And fiscal year 22 was 32.7%. And that's unacceptable. And the addition of the 2 hearing officers allows us to add the capability of scheduling at least 160 additional cases per week. And the 2 legal secretary 2s serve as their support staff, but also are a major component in the entire scheduling process. And I hope that answers your question.
Just really quick, the last part of my question was with the addition of the 4 new positions, so it's the 2 hearing officers and the 2 legal secretaries, how long do you think it'll get us to fall back into compliance?
Our goal is once this is approved and we conduct our recruitment and staff the positions, we're hoping to bring compliance within 3 to 4 months.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That was the end of the questions I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Let's see, anybody there? Okay. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move for approval.
We have a motion to approve, second from the Vice Chair Carlton, second from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. We will now go to number 20 and 21. That was something that someone asked for. Oh. Senator Neal.
Hi, thanks, Chair Dennis. So I'll make this really quick. Just on the questions that I had on 20 and 21 together was, how are the state's public charter school authority managing the homeless youth that are going to the school? I was just trying to see how they were triggering. I thought there were existing dollars for wraparound services and how they were coordinating with other agencies to try to support those students that they may identify on their campus or the various campuses.
Rebecca Fiden for the record, Executive Director of the State Public Charter School Authority. Thank you for the question. So first and foremost, the State Public Charter School Authority and our schools are responsible for serving all students, including those students who enroll that are homeless, and ensuring that they remove barriers for entry and provide supports to those students. Currently, we have a set aside of our Title I funding that is available to our schools for some of those services, such as supplies, materials, sometimes, things like even toiletries if students need additional personal supplies, or in some cases, transportation can be provided as well. These two grants are unique and different. One, the McKinney-Vento competitive grant is specifically being used to expand access and resources for our schools. I can provide some detail if it would be helpful, but this was a competitive grant we applied for and proposed several projects to the Department of Education, and a couple of those were funded. And the second grant, the ARP Homeless Children's Youth Grant, is a formula-based grant from the Department of Education. I believe all of the LEAs were allocated these funds, and this grant is very similar to our McKinney-Vento set-aside, but will provide additional resources. I will note that we have seen an increase over the last couple of years in the number of homeless students served, and so we do anticipate that there is increased demand for additional supports for those students.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions on this item? Senator Neal, do you want to make a motion?
I make a motion to move G20 and 21 for approval.
We have a motion. Let's see, since you're in the Senate, let me take some, or Vice Chair Carlton as the second. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, we are now going to number 37. Who pulled this one?
Chair, I pulled it.
Okay, go ahead if you'll ask your question.
Thank you, and I don't mind.
Yeah, I don't know if we need somebody to come up. Depends. Go ahead and ask the question, and then whoever can answer, I guess, will come up.
That's okay. I can defer to later. I know we're getting long on this meeting. I just had some interest in the 1.6 million for recovery housing and just where that was going to be directed to.
Good afternoon. This is Jessica Sanders with the Community Development Block Grant Program. For the record, the $1.6 million, it is a pilot program from HUD, and we are going to be doing a competitive process for that to request applications.
Great. I'd love to see how that pilot goes, and also where could we inform the public or any of those housing programs that might qualify to apply.
Jessica Sanders, for the record, this will go out to our partners, and it will also go out into the 3 papers. It will go to Vegas, Reno, and then it will also go to a rural paper.
Okay.
To call for applications.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Someone Tolles, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that we pass G37.
And I have a motion from Senator Tolles, a second from Senator Don Darrell Loop. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed say nay. The motion carries. Okay. We will now go to item number 43, which is Department of Health and Human Services, Aging and Disability Services, Home and Community-Based Services.
Good afternoon. Gina Schmidt, for the record, Administrator for Aging and Disability Services Division. This work program requests the addition of federal public health workforce coordination literacy funding. The funding is designated by the Administration for Community Living to establish new positions that expand public health workforce. The creation of 3 new positions to serve as regional coordinators will increase awareness of social service programs to healthcare providers, address health disparities and gaps in services for people with disabilities and older adults. Public health promotes and protects the health of people in the communities where they live, work, and play. Our network plays an essential role in that work, especially during the public health emergency, where we saw COVID, our network collaborate to ensure people with disabilities had access to healthcare, to vaccinations, and other essential services such as food and prescription drugs. This funding through the federal government is available through September of 2024 and is intended to help the cost of staff to conduct these crucial public health activities and to alleviate the strain on our networks that we've experienced during the pandemic. If approved, these positions will be maintained in the future with a combination of Medicaid administrative funds, Title III administrative funds, general fund, and any discretionary grants that we identify as appropriate. This is part of our just so you're aware, this concept of the regional coordinators was something that we had intended to put in our future biennium budget request, but this funding opportunity came available before that. So that is why you see this work program before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
We do have some questions. Assemblyman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So excited about these 3 new positions and regional coordinators. So I think I might have heard you mentioned it, but talk about the plan for the longevity so we can keep these individuals once we've got them locked in place past the life cycle of these dollars.
Thank you, Dina Schmidt, for the record. So we will continue to look for additional discretionary funds as they become available. If this particular funding source continues this grant, we will be applying again. But we do know that some of the activities that these people will be doing is Medicaid administrative claiming appropriate, as well as some of our Title III administrative funding. And then you will see a small request for a portion of general fund in our future biennium budget to continue these activities.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And I think what I'm excited about with this is I think that there's this assumption that everything that gets done within your department and all the hard people who work in your department to put together programs, that it's always known by the community or in particular healthcare providers. And that's not always true. So it looks like that they're going to be bridging this gap in that information and awareness. And we were just having this conversation, I think, with, she's gone, Senator Harris the other night about how come so many more people don't know about some of these programs. And this will be one of the ways where people will know more about important programs. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Other questions on this item? Okay, Madam Vice Chair. Assemblyman Carlton makes motion to approve. Second from Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay. We're going to items number 51 and 64.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, but I asked 46 to be pulled too. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. We're going to go to item number 46. Thank you for catching that.
So my question is to both the Department of Emergency Management, and wondering about these FEMA funds for reimbursement. In the statement for justification, it was these FEMA funds would allow for activities of the COVID-19 to be expanded throughout the state. But then I did not see any documentation to support what you were going to expand, as opposed to just being reimbursed for cost already. That's my first question.
Here, this is Julia Peak for DPBH. I can speak to that, and I know there is a representation on the phone from DEM as well, but I'm happy to answer if that's all right. So Julia Peak for the record. Dr. Titus, thank you for that question. So it is confusing in the way we wrote it, so I apologize for that. I'll just say, as a strategy for DPBH and many agencies in the state, we wanted to make sure that we brought in as many federal funds as possible to support the COVID efforts. And what we did in this case is we looked at what opportunity we had to get 100% federal reimbursement for FEMA for our grant funds. So we did this for epidemiology, and we're also doing it right now for immunization. And so these projects that FEMA will be reimbursing us for are projects that have already been completed under the ELC grant, and again, hopefully for the immunization grant in the future. When we say that we'll be able to expand COVID response and really more general epidemiology response, this allows us to free up, in this scenario, over $4 million of ELC that can be used either to extend
efforts for the duration of the award or do new efforts that are allowable under the ELC grant. So it's truly just trying to bring in as many resources as possible to expand and extend services. In this specific case, bringing in that over $4 million in reimbursement will allow us to spend more time and effort on the EPI tracks, the shared infectious disease reporting system and that development. Also allows us to keep many of the staff that we've contracted with that were set to leave us. It'll allow us to extend their contracts and the work is there for epidemiology, as you all know, and now with monkeypox and other things. And then last but not least, it also allows us to get some enhanced data security systems in place for our infectious disease reporting system and other data systems within OFI. So it's truly just making sure we bring in every federal dollar possible to get the most bang for our buck in the EPI program.
Thank you for that. Just because the way it is presented that it's for lab supplies and materials, and I have concerns if you apply for it, does it have to be used for that? And it sounds like you're going to you're going to document that you're using it for offset those costs, but that frees up funds for other appropriate uses. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yep, Dr. Tice, you're absolutely right. So the scope in which FEMA reimburses is very narrow. And so, for example, in this case, they were able to provide funding directly for the purchase of a lab supply related to COVID. And so we made many purchases in that category. And now we freed up ELC funds that have a much broader scope, and we can fill other gaps within the EPI program with that grant.
And I guess for our emergency management director, are we continuing to stockpile, but we've narrowed how long of a period of time we have a stockpile for? I just want to make sure that we're not continuing to build things and that we don't need.
Yeah, Julia Peak for the record, and we did provide some information in the informational item as well related to the test kits. We are not trying to store or purchase test supplies that will expire on a shelf. So we are not ordering until we actually need it. We do have a small supply of antigen testing kits within our public health preparedness warehouse, but certainly not storing for many, many months because there is an expiration. In this specific case, these were products purchased by the laboratory at Southern Nevada Health District. So it's not going to be your at-home test kits that we're talking about for this reimbursement. It is lab-based equipment and or supplies that were purchased by the health district.
Excellent, thank you. And again, thanks for all the effort you've put into this. And Mr. Chair, if nobody else has questions, I'll move to approve.
Any other questions? Not hearing any, I will take a motion from Assemblywoman Titus to approve. Second from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Okay, motion passes. Let's go, that was 46. Now we'll go to 51 and 64. Good afternoon.
Hi again. This is Katrina Nielsen for the record. We're actually here for 64. So someone else will speak to 51.
I think we could.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Sorry, this is Debbie Reynolds, Deputy Administrator with the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. With me today is John Barrowman, our Chief Financial Officer over Behavioral Health, and he can provide a brief update of this work program, number 51.
With emphasis on brief.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. My name is John Barrowman. I am the Chief Fiscal Officer for the Behavioral Health and the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. This request is in front of us today. We are looking at improving our billing system that we use to collect insurance recoveries when we provide direct services in our hospitals. And I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll start it off. What can you explain your current policy regarding your requiring agencies to revert vacancy savings to the general fund rather than spending the savings on one-time expenditures?
Thank you.
That's for
Again, John Barman.
I think that's. I think this one is more for the GFO. We got to hear from her today.
Thank you so much. Amy Stevenson, Director for Governor's Finance Office. Can you repeat the question for me?
Okay, yes. So can you explain the current policy regarding requiring agencies to revert vacancy savings to the general fund rather than expending the savings on one-time expenditures that potentially require ongoing costs?
Thank you for that question, Chair. Right now, it's a case-by-case basis. I am brand new and still learning the policy of GFO. So to determine the needs of the agencies, it's on a case-by-case basis. And we'll be happy to discuss it with staff.
Okay, thank you. And also, what's the justification for seeking to fund a one-time cost now instead of during the 2023 session where it could be evaluated much better? That one's whoever.
Again, I'm sorry because I'm very brand new, so I am going to use that card right now. But I can get back to you on that one because I did not see this one go forward. Unless Dwayne has it. See?
Okay, there you go. Looks like we have somebody to answer.
For the record, Dwayne Young, Policy Director for the Office of the Governor. We know that typically these budget categories do revert. We are in, as we've discussed ad nauseum today, a staffing crisis. And so there are particulars, as Deputy Director Garland now has pointed out, Stevenson, excuse me, I went back to the old name, has pointed out today, this is done on a case-by-case basis. With this particular system, being familiar with it, this will actually change the budgeting projections for the next session. And so using these salary savings to better accurately bill those private payers and Medicaid insurances from our inpatient facilities will actually change the projections of what they will revert as well as what they will keep in their ending fund balance for the next session as they build their budgets. And so as we know, agencies submit their budget by September 1st. However, that remains in constant flux until the governor releases that in January. And so to better have this system in place now will better help us to have those projections more accurately in the next year for the next legislative session.
Okay, thank you. Do we have other questions? Okay, thank you. If we don't have any other questions, Madam Vice Chair, do you want to make a motion? We have a motion from Madam Vice Chair Carlton, and we have a second from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on this motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Okay, I didn't hear any. Motion carries. Okay, let's go to item number, let's see, that was 51, 56. Let's go to item number 62.
That was also me, Mr. Chair.
Similar titles.
So I'm sorry, everybody. Well, actually, I'm not sorry. I'm trying to do my job. So I have some questions regarding the shortfall and the transfer of the $2.518 million to Clark County for adoption categories. Reading your justification for this, the statement was that there continues to be a temporary increase in the FMAP percent. And in addition, the increased collection of the Title IV-E average cost of subsidies has risen from $629 to $638 per month. So in my mind, that would increase the cost. You get some offset with the FMAP increase for a while, and then the subsidies have increased. So why are we then paying more? Is this a transfer of funds? Are you a pass-through of funds? Because if it happens to you, why is it just Clark County and not all the state needing this?
Thank you for the question, Katrina Nielsen, for the record. So the Title IV, the temporary FMAP was due to COVID, and it was, I believe, a 6% increase. and that was a temporary increase. And so
Can you pull that mic just a little?
it allows you to bring in additional additional Title IV funding. We are actually experiencing a shortfall in our adoption subsidies category. It's not a revenue shortfall, it is an expenditure category shortfall. And so we don't need additional Title IV revenue to bring in. We're asking to increase the adoption subsidy category to fully fund that category with the increased cost of the subsidy rate.
Again, just to be clear, so is this unique to Clark County?
Katrina Nielsen for the record. No, this is not unique to Clark County. We have the subsidy is included in rural child welfare as well as Washoe County. We're experiencing the shortfall due to the increase in Clark County's average subsidy payments, and we do not have the same shortfall at this time in the other two, the Washoe County and rural child welfare.
Can you or anybody in your department or anybody on the line or your backups tell us how long you think the FMAP increase is going to continue?
Sorry, Katrina Nielsen for the record. I don't know the answer to that question, but would be happy to get back to you.
And maybe somebody on our staff might be able to answer that question or find it for us. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I think our staff will probably have to do some research.
Great.
So, all right, thank you. Any other questions on this item?
If no one has any other questions, Mr. Chair, I will move to approve 62.
I'm not hearing any, so I'll take that motion and I'll take a second from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Thank you. The motion carries. We will now go to items number 112 and 113. So this is Office of the Military. On both. I believe the Office of the Military. Is it Cheryl that's online? All right.
Yes, sir. And then Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Carlton, and members of the.
You're really soft. We're having a hard time hearing you.
That better?
Keep talking. Let me see.
Good afternoon, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Carlton, and members of the committee. My name
Still
is Cheryl
a little
Tyler.
soft, so try to move as close as I get to the mic, I guess, as you can.
Good afternoon. Is that better, sir?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll just tell our folks to be
Good
quiet.
afternoon. Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Carlton, and members of the committee. My name is Cheryl Tyler, ASO for the Office of the Military. And with me is Ms. Lauren Schulman, the administrator for our Battle-Born Youth Challenge program. These work programs are to request approval to balance forward remaining state fiscal year 22 funds to state fiscal year 23 funds for the operating of our Battle-Born Youth Challenge program. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Vice Chair Carlton has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we've been very proud of this program and very happy about it, and it's we understand the difficulties that it's been facing because this is the Youth Challenge program, if I'm in the right place, correct? So, good, just want to make sure I'm on the right notes. There's so many notes flying around here. So, if you could give us a little bit of an update on what you're trying to do to increase it. We know how valuable a program this is, and we just need to figure out how do we get this out to the kids and get them involved? And when do you anticipate the classes to resume? And I also have some concerns that about, I believe 75% of the funding is federal. So with skipping a class, what does this do to the federal funding? And is there a way we need to compensate for that in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Cheryl Tyler. With me again is Administrator Schulman to respond to the operating. I could answer to some of the questions, such as the next class will be in January. We're only stopping the class for this particular class, July till December. I will defer to Administrator Schulman for the rest.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Lauren Schulman, and I'm proud to be the Program Director of the Battle-Born Youth Challenge Academy. We currently have our entire team focused on recruiting. So regardless of our title, we are spending our days traveling the state of Nevada. We are also engaged in virtual meetings with schools and different stakeholders so that we have the best opportunity to educate the state as to this opportunity for our youth.
Okay, any other questions?
And I'm sorry if I missed the 75% discussion of the federal funding.
So our 75% funding is not impacted. We will continue to receive the 75% match for the 25% that the state has funded.
Do we miss out on it for that one class, though?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. If we're losing money, we just got to know.
Yep. Any other questions on this item? Yes, Senator Gokicia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And how are we doing on the recruiting of staff? I mean, that's what I'm hearing. I do represent that area as well. And staff seems to be the real issue. When you only got a 20% or 25% staff level, it's pretty hard to put a school on. Although I understand Elko County School District provides the teachers, I know there are some issues with just having enough people to even maintain the facility.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the question. Again, for the record, this is Lauren Schulman. While we are traveling, we are absolutely recruiting for staff. So we've set quotas for each month. We currently have recruited the 2 for this month that we have set those goals for. So we are on track to hire the number of cadre that we need to bring in a class of 70 in January.
So you will be fully staffed by January?
We are on track to meet that goal. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're 6 months away. A lot can slip. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any other questions? I'm not hearing any. Councilwoman Carlton.
I would move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman Carlton moved for approval. Second from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you so much for the support.
Thank you. Let's see. We'll now go to item number 122, 123.
Good evening. This is Philip Burrell. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Before we read in the revised numbers, I want to give just a little bit of context to be helpful for this conversation, and any questions that are asked, we can definitely answer. Back language AB 494 allows us to transfer general fund revenues between state fiscal years with IFC approval here today. That's the 2 work programs that we're going to read in the numbers for just here in a second. We have a surplus in state fiscal year 22 because of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA, which provides us an extra 6.2% FMAP during the public health emergency. I think we were just talking about, or the conversation on FMAP was just discussed a minute ago. For the Medicaid program, that's 6.2%. This saves the state general funds, and the deadline is on a quarterly basis. So the deadline for Health and Home Services, HHS, to notify states that the federal public health emergency would be ending for October 13, 2022 was August 14th. 2022, so Sunday of this week. In the absence of the notice, we can assume that the PHE will be extended an additional 90 days. So we won't actually see, we will expect an additional FMAP for the period of Q1, which goes until January 1, 2023. During the PHE, as you guys are all well aware, we've seen tremendous caseload, above 36%. Currently, the Medicaid population is about 904,000 plus, with that being about 1 in 4 Nevadans. We anticipate this caseload growth will have an impact for sure on our Medicaid budget in 23, but we're not currently projecting a shortfall. Wanted to make sure we could highlight that. The transfer amounts here are impacted by the revenues that flow into our intergovernmental transfer account, 3157, that funds our supplemental payments and state savings. The division will continue to continued to accept revenues as late as possible for calendar year 22, prior to doing the work programs and the updated revised work programs. And that subsequently led to the factors that we have some last changes here today. That's one of our factors. We're incredibly fortunate that we've been working directly with the LCB fiscal staff as well as GFO fiscal leaders on this work program, on these engagements. And I just want to show appreciation for them because it's a continued process as we work on the very big Medicaid budget. I'll stop right now and ask Abil Farrar, my ASO4, to speak to the updated revised numbers, and we can answer any questions after that.
Okay. I don't, do we have anyone that has any questions? I think the big question had to do with because it was a revision that was just done. We want to make sure that we got that on the record. So anyone have any questions? If not, Carlton.
Move for approval. Mr. Thurley, would you like to put the revisions on the record for us, please? If you wanted that as part of the motion.
Yeah, I think that should be part of the motion. Yeah, Mr. Thurley, would you put that on the record? Thank you.
I trust you with the numbers better than me right now.
Yeah.
Do we have John read it in, or?
If the agency would put the revisions on the record, please.
Yeah, can you come back up and make sure that you put those on?
Yes, good afternoon. Bill Farrar for the record. I'm an administrative services officer with healthcare finance and policy. The changes, the final revisions and amounts for the work programs are for work program 60227. We have a reduction in state general fund of $104,581,650. We have a reduction in Title 19 federal funds of $993,026 for a total reduction of $574,676. The category changes are: category 11 is being reduced by $952,370. Category 12 is being reduced by $51,704,895. Category 13 is being reduced by $45,259,300. Category 14 is being reduced by $67,070,819. Category 15 is being reduced by $4,614,537. Category 17 is being reduced by $4,498,278. Category 19 is being reduced by $4,124. Category 20 is being reduced by $16,999,999. Category 24 is being reduced by $13,999,999. And lastly, category 28 is being reduced by $105,470,356 for a total reduction of $310,574,676. on the next work program number C60158, we are increasing state general fund by the amount of $91,512,267. We're increasing Title 19 federal funds by $183,831,032 for a total increase of $275,343,299. The category changes are an increase in Category 11 of $952,370. Category 12 increases by $25,576,032. Category 13 increases by $17,162,299. Category 14 increases by $67,070,819. Category 15 increases by $14,112,128. Category 19 increases by $4,227,084. And lastly, Category 28 increases by $146,242,568 for a total increase of $275,343,299.
Can you, I'm going to have staff talk to you because I think that some of the numbers that were just read were, weren't the ones that we were looking for. So, Mr. Thorley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Went through for the record. So the numbers that were read for work program C60158, the FY 23 work program were not the inverse of the reductions from FY 22. So for example, the general fund reduction for FY 22 was going to be about 104.6 million, but then the augmentation in 23 was only 91.5 million. I think we're expecting that to be the exact same number.
Correct. That's our apologies. The numbers should be the reversed from the fiscal year 22 over that we mentioned at the first set of numbers. Did you want us to restate that?
I think probably just saying it's the inverse of work program C60227. What you read in for C60227 is revision. So all those reductions, the inverse of that is what the augmentation is for C60158. Is that correct?
Correct. This is just Phil Burrell for the record. The revisions are the inverse from the numbers read from C60227.
Yeah, we need to go on recess for just a second so we can double check. We want to make sure we get this right. So we'll be in recess. Don't go anywhere. Just stay put. Okay, we will go back. We're going to go back on the record. I'm going to have Mr. Thorley clarify so that we know what was just read in so that we can do a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, just to reiterate what the agency provided testimony on regarding the revision. The revision to the FY22 work program, which is C60227, with all the reductions to the various categories related to general fund reductions and Title 19 federal funds reductions. That is exactly as stated by the agency. So the revisions to the work program will be as the agency put on the record. And then for FY23, that work program is C60158. The revision to that work program will be the inverse of the revision to the FY22 work program. So everywhere there was negative amounts for general fund appropriations or federal funds, and the various categories, it'll just be the reverse of that. So that's the revision for both those work programs.
Okay, now it's clear. Clearer.
So moved.
We have a motion from Senator, or from she's still Senator. She was my first Senator. Vice Chair Carlton, and we have a second from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the very clear motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Any opposed say nay. Was that? No, okay. Okay. The motion carries unanimous. So that is the last item on G. Let me find my agenda here. Okay. All right, we'll go now to, let's see, after G, item number H, statement of contingency account balance. And let's see, Mr. Thorley's going to do that for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be extremely brief. You can find the contingency account balance statement in your meeting packet on volume 4 under tab H, which is page 149. Since this is the first IFC meeting of fiscal year 23, but fiscal year 22 is still open, it's kind of a bridge meeting, so you'll see the detailed statement that begins on page 150. There is a detailed statement for FY22. So page 151 and 152 is for FY22, and then there's also a detailed statement for FY23, beginning on page 152. On the summary page on page 149, there are 7 requests before the committee today for allocations from the IFC contingency account. And really quickly, if all those requests are approved, there will be $27.1 million remaining in the contingency account. And rather than talk anymore, I'll answer any questions if the committee members have any.
What questions do we have? I'll give you, let me give you just a second because I know he just went through that. So I'll give you 30 seconds. Yeah, Simlum and Benitez Thompson.
So are we good?
We're good.
Okay.
That was directed to staff. Yeah, and they said we're good. Yes, some of them Titus.
Sorry. I'm trying to put my hand through that. Could you quote again? Because I see on when I'm looking at this, it's not 27, it's 21. So.
It's 21. Okay, I'm sorry. Wayne Thorley for the record, LCB Fiscal. If I misspoke, it was 21.7 million.
Okay, all right. I heard 27. I'm flipping through here trying to figure out what column are you looking at? Because, all right. So I am good. Thank you very much.
So we thought we were good, but we're still good. Okay. All right. Any further questions? Let's see. All right, so that's just an information item. We've got, let's see. We've got item number I1B, or what is it? Oh, the 1A, okay. Water resources. There's a request for an allocation of $105,293 to fund additional costs needed to complete the repair maintenance of the South Fork Dam. Okay, so we have the Deputy Administrator, Christopher Thornton.
Good afternoon, Micheline Fairbank. Unfortunately, Mr. Thorson had to leave, and so I am standing in for Chris Thorson as a Deputy Administrator with the division, and I'm available to take any questions.
And do we have any questions from any member? Yes, Senator Titus.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. I'm curious, is this actually undergone? I mean, you've gone out to bid and you're going to start this process because we've been hearing about this dam and the risk for quite some time now.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Titus. So the construction on the project is ongoing at this time. They began the work back in May. And so this is an additional funding over the funds that were requested and appropriated to address additional conditions that were identified at the project site so that we can continue to do the work and to complete construction and repair to the dam in a timely fashion during this construction season.
Great, thank you. And I know you're substituting for somebody who may not be able to answer this question, but perhaps somebody in the department can get back to me with it. Very curious about the process of putting bids out for these dams, dam repair, the Cave Lake Dam. They've been money allocated for the Cave Lake Dam. It's not even been put out to bid, and I'm wondering what that process is. And if you're looking at putting that out to bid and when.
Thank you again for the question. So the Division of Water Resources is not the record owner of the Cave Lake Dam, but we are involved in the repair process as the regulator of dam construction and dam ownership within the state of Nevada. And with respect to that particular process, I'd be happy to have someone contact you directly to explain how that process proceeds.
Great, thank you, because I'm concerned we're losing some of our bonds or funding over that if we don't get that dam started and at least put out the bid. So thank you, and I appreciate follow-up and anybody else on this committee who's interested. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Someone Carlton?
For approval, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion from Senator Carlton to approve, second Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay. We need to go to the next one, which is I1B, which is Division of Forestry. And we have Casey Forester, Fire Warden.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Casey, State Forester Fire Warden for the Nevada Division of Forestry. Our request before you today is a little over $1.9 million to pay the fire bills so we can close our emergency response account. I will be that brief, and I'm available for questions.
Okay, questions? Do we have any? Vice Chair Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is pretty typical of what we see. Thank you very much for being so brief. If there are no questions, Mr. Chairman, I would move for approval.
Do we have any questions? If not, I will take the motion from Assemblywoman Carlton and take a second from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, let's see. We are now on item number, it would be number 2, Department of Indigent Defense Services. We have.
These should all 2A, B, C, and J should all be heard together.
So we're going to hear 2A, B, C, and agenda item J all together. And this would be, let's see, Marcy Ryba, the Executive Director.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Marcy Riva, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Department of Indigent Defense Services. We are here today to request reimbursement for our rural counties for expenses associated with indigent defense services that are over the maximum contribution formula. If you have any questions, we are available.
Questions? Oh, Senator Camizaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to clarify a few things because we had this back in our last full in-person IFC meeting in June. And so I'm going to take a few of these out of order. As to agenda item number J, as I understand it, these are 6 Davis counties, so they're part of the consent decree. You are seeking indigent defense costs for those counties. Those counties listed there, those 6 counties, Douglas, Eureka, Lyon, Mineral, Nye, and White Pine, have all met their max contribution, and therefore you're asking for these costs, which would be restricted funds pursuant to Section 80 of AB 494. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. The second item that I'm going to address, I'm going to go through to, I2A. The first piece of that in A is a request for unrestricted funds to reimburse several counties that are non-Davis counties, Churchill, Lincoln, Carson City, Humboldt, and Pershing counties for case-related expenditures. And my understanding is that those counties are also have also not met their max contribution. And I think this is where our previous issue had sort of come up. But I just wanted to clarify that first before I ask a couple questions.
And thank you. Through the chair to the senator, as a confirmation, that is correct that these counties have not met their maximum for that set amount that was set in the first part of the maximum contribution formula. However, part of these are actually Davis counties and some are not Davis counties. Churchill and Lincoln are Davis counties.
Okay, so that's my misspeak, because I think one of the issues that we're trying to, as we're ferreting through these particular requests, is that we're trying to keep the Davis counties and the non-Davis counties separate, because I do think, and that's my question to you, so I guess without respect to those 2 counties, then what is your rationale for reimbursing non-Davis counties, so they're not part of the consent decree, for costs that are in excess of the maximum contribution amounts where they haven't even met their maximum contribution amounts? I mean, that I think continues to be kind of the question that we have.
Thank you, Marcy Riva, for the record. Through the chair to the senator, this is a discretionary part of the maximum contribution formula that will be up to this legislative body to determine whether or not they would like to fund this. Pursuant to NRS 180.320 subsection 3, The board was granted authority to adopt regulations to establish a formula for determining the maximum amount that a county may pay for indigent defense services. The formula that was adopted is actually a two-part formula. The first part of the formula is that formula that is basically the average of fiscal year 18-19 plus inflation is the maximum out of pocket, and anything over and above that would be a state expense. The second part is that discretionary part. And the reason that this was placed in by the Board on Indigent Defense is they wanted to create separation from the judiciary in requests for case-related expenses. At the time that these regulations were written, public defenders commonly had to request case-related expenses from the judiciary. This was different than a prosecutor because a prosecutor had budgets within their own department and they were able to just spend the money without having any sort of oversight from the judiciary. So the purpose of this second part is to provide the same judicial oversight for a public defender that a prosecutor could have. So to encourage counties to create that separation from the judiciary in their plans, the board adopted this where it said that if they create that separation from the judiciary, those expenses may be a charge against the state and reimbursed to the county. So we are putting this to this legislative body to make that decision as to whether or not they would like to reimburse those requests.
Yeah, and I remember, and I appreciate that, and I remember our conversation from the last time. I think that the issue continues to be for me, Mr. Chair, is that we're being asked to reimburse for expenses based on a regulation that was adopted where this doesn't have to do, the county could have set up a budget that said, we're gonna pay for some of these things, and especially for counties where we're not at the maximum amount of contribution, that wouldn't have to involve the judiciary. That could be something that the county sets up, but rather we've implemented a regulation that says the state may pay for these items. But for me, the difficulty is approving these unrestricted IFC contingency funds to cover the costs where counties haven't met that max contribution amount. That's where it gets a little tricky for me. So I understand that. I think my issue, and I think we've kind of gone over this before, Mr. Chair, is just that we're talking about a situation where the state could reimburse that, but we have counties that haven't met those maximums, and the counties could still pay for these without involving the judiciary. So that's where I think my rub is. The other thing I wanted to just make sure we had specifically talked about was item I2B. My understanding is that these are 6 Davis counties. Those are counties that have reached their maximum contribution. They are asking for this $429,860 dollars for reimbursement for unrestricted funds, and that is because that would exceed the amount that has been set aside pursuant to Assembly Bill 494. And I want to make sure I've got that correct. And I've got that those are Davis counties. And I see you nodding your head yes, so I will take that.
That
as
is
yes.
correct.
Perfect. And then the last item was the last item that we wanted to discuss was I2C, and that is $225,591 in unrestricted IFC contingency funds to reimburse for indigent defense costs in excess of the maximum contribution amount. They're non-Davis counties. They're not included in the consent agreement. Those kind of fall into the previous category that we just talked about. My concern remains the same as to that, Mr. Chair, but we sort of just had that conversation because there were the non-Davis counties included in that. And I think that you've answered that question that I asked. So those were the items that I wanted to talk about on these. And Mr. Chair, I'll see if there are other questions from members of the committee, but I do have a motion to make for the committee's consideration after folks have asked questions.
Okay, let me see what questions we have. Senator Tatro.
Thank you. Just for my own clarification, so did the counties prior to the change when they were getting paid by the judiciary, were they made whole for their defense funds without reaching their maximums?
Thank you. Through the chair. The creation of our department is pretty new. We were created in 2019, and we actually had the opportunity to create this formula to set maximum amount for the counties to start having some support from the state. Assembly Bill 480 was put into place. And it basically realized the fact that the counties have been taking 100% of the responsibility for indigent defense expenses thus far. And the preamble discusses that the state wanted to stand up to assist with those. So in the creation of this, there was that opportunity to create the maximum contribution formula. So prior to this year, this formula was just adopted. Indigent defense expenses fell 100% on the counties, other than expenses that were related to expenses that are expenses against the state, like representing individuals in prisons, et cetera. That's an example.
Okay, thank you. That clears it up for me. Apologize.
Do we have any other questions? Not hearing any, so I will entertain a motion from Senator Camizaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, kind of given where we're at and the information that we've gotten over the last two meetings, I would be comfortable asking for this committee to approve items J and I2B, which provides funding for Davis counties that have exceeded their calculated maximum contribution amounts. So the counties have made their contributions for indigent defense services. And this would allow us to pay the restricted funds from AB 494 for those costs in J, and the unrestricted IFC contingency funds to reimburse for the remainder over and above that for item I2B. I would move not to approve agenda item number I2A to reimburse those case-related expenditures for those counties, which, as I understand, may include both Davis and non-Davis counties, because they have not exceeded their maximum contribution amounts. So that should be left with the counties, and should they exceed that, then we can have another conversation. And then not to approve item I2C for the allocation of unrestricted IFC contingency funds to reimburse those non-Davis counties for costs that have exceeded their maximum contribution amounts.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have a second?
I have I'll second that, Mr. Chairman. And if I may make a comment, I believe this is.
Hold on, let me. So we have a motion from Senator Camizaro, second from Vice Chair Carlton. Discussion on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I believe this is consistent with the action that the committee took previously. And I think it's very important in these particular cases, especially with the consent decree, that we stay consistent across the board moving forward. So I appreciate the majority leader walking us through this, because this was very complicated, and I want to thank her for the work on it. So I would be supportive of the motion.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you. Just for clarification, just to make sure, so those Davis counties, when they do exceed, they can come back and ask and get that reimbursement. But those counties who chose not to be part of that suit and are not Davis counties will never get reimbursed for their cost. Is that clear?
Senator Camizaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm not going to comment on what action in the future this committee could or could not take, depending on what information is presented to us. But certainly at this time, I think that, to Vice Chair Carlton's point, that's inconsistent with the passage of Assembly Bill 480 and 494, which designated those additional set-aside of funds. And so at this point, I don't think that, while I won't comment on what this committee may do in the future, at this point, I don't think that we're in a position where we should be reimbursing for those costs for those non-Davis counties. And that's what this motion is for today, for those non-Davis counties to not reimburse those expenses.
Yes, Senator Ngokachia.
Yes, thank you. I just need to clarify. Now, we do have, I believe, Davis counties, Churchill and Lincoln, that haven't met the threshold. Okay, at the point they meet the threshold, then they can be reimbursed as well.
And Mr.
Senator
Chair, if I may,
Camizaro, go ahead.
I think again, I won't speak as to future action that this committee could or could not take, but today we are, part of the motion that I have made is to reimburse Davis counties that have exceeded their maximum for those amounts over and above that maximum.
Thank you. Very clear.
Any other questions? Okay.
Mr. Chair.
This was discussion, so we kind of got a little sidetracked. Yes, go ahead.
But just discussion on the
Senator
motion, just
Hafen.
for clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I understand the motion correctly, we're proposing to deny 2A. Are we only denying the non-Davis counties? Or are we also denying the case-related expenses for the Davis counties under 2A?
Okay, I think it's Senator Camizaro can answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The request in item I2A was originally, I believed, was just non-Davis counties, but it was pointed out that there are 2 counties that are Davis counties. In either case, the motion contemplates not reimbursing those items because they have not exceeded none of those counties have exceeded their maximum contributions, irrespective of whether they are Davis counties or not.
Okay, any other comments or clarifications on the motion? Not hearing any. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion carries. Okay, now we're going on to I2D. When you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to keep it short, Marcy Riva for the record. This request is for an additional staff position to cover hearings that were created as a result of Assembly Bill 424, as well as Senate Bill 7. There are those bail hearings which are happening on weekends and holidays, and the Public Defender's Office has insufficient staff to be able to cover those. So we are asking for an additional staff member.
Okay, we do have a question. Given the authority in SB 459 to accept additional funds from Carson City and or Story County beyond the limits identified in Section 9 of the bill, does Carson City or Story County have available funds to support a portion of the salary and operation costs for the new deputy public defender in fiscal year 2023?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Story County, the cost of the public defender actually exceed the maximum contribution for Story County. So there are no additional expenses that we can request. Pursuant to the statute, an estimate was sent to Carson City in May, and that estimate becomes a final bill. So I don't see authority under NRS 180 where we can ask for additional funding after that estimate becomes finalized.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Not hearing any. Vice Chair Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for approval of this position and would ask that moving forward that the Office of the State Public Defender request the position as an enhancement in its biennial budget request for the 2023 session. Creating a position is great, but we need to put it in future budget too to make sure it's still there. So we request you putting that into the budget. That would be part of the motion.
Great. We have a motion from Vice Chair Carlton, second from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion or clarification? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay. Okay, we already did J and K, so we're moving on to item number L, as in Larry. Request for transfer from the interim finance committee's account for foreclosure mediation assistance. And we have Perry Fagan from Department of Business and Industry, Deputy Director.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time. My name is Perry Fagan for the record. I am also the president of Home Means Nevada, Inc. And we are currently requesting the transfer of $175,053 from the account for foreclosure mediation assistance to the Home Means Nevada, Inc. program to continue support for the foreclosure mediation program. And I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have at this time.
Anyone have any questions? Not hearing any. Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move for approval of this item.
We have a motion to approve from Assemblywoman Carlton, second from Senator Camizaro. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. All right, we're going to go to item M. So these are requests for approval to accept gifts and grants. You have them before you. We could have presentations, but really all we're doing is accepting gifts and grants. I'm willing to, unless somebody has a question on one of these, I'm willing to do a motion to approve them all. Does anybody have any questions on any of these individually? Okay, we have a motion from Assemblywoman Carlton to approve, second from Senator Camizaro. So this would be to approve items 1A and B and item 2. Is that correct, Mr. Smith? M1AB and item 2. Yeah, M2, yeah. All right, any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, we're going to now item number N, request for approval of expenditure from the account for renewable energy, energy efficiency, and energy conservation pursuant to NRS 701.5853. We have Deputy Director Denise Froelich and Karen Long, from the Grants and Fiscal Manager. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you. This is
Go ahead.
Thank you. This is Denise Froelich, Deputy Director from the Governor's Office of Energy, here to ask permission for approval for the expenditure from the account of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and energy conservation pursuant to NRS 701.5853. Office of the Governor. We are asking to request to expend $50,000 of the fund to fund a portion of the purchase of the electrical vehicle testing equipment for the State Department of Agriculture, Division of Measurement Standards to measure electricity discharge from electric vehicle charging stations.
Questions? Assemblywoman Titus.
Thank you. So the goal is to go to every single electric station and make sure that they're producing the amount of electricity for charging at each one they say they are? Is that like, you're not going to, so you have like a little tester and you'll do that throughout the state? And my second question would be, how often do you then have to repeat that? And then will you certify like you do at the scales? We'll see a certificate that you've been there and we know that the gas pump's accurate or the scales are accurate. So just a quick process?
Yes, thank you. Denise Froelich for the record. Through you, Chair Dennis, to you, Titus. I apologize. This is my 5th week in the office, so I'm a little green on the details of the project itself. At this point, what I can share with you is that my understanding is that what this does is that it ensures that EV charging stations are properly dispensing electricity to consumers and properly collecting the cost of that electricity for merchants. And if that answers your question, if it does not, I would be happy to take your question back to my team. I'm very confident that they will be able to
Right,
provide you with
and
the answer.
it doesn't, and if they could send me a little bit more detail, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Sotomayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, I'm pretty sure that you're only going to do this in situations where an individual is paying to charge their vehicle. There's really no reason to go to all the other free sites and sit there and waste taxpayer dollars testing on something that's not being paid for. Am I correct in that assumption, Director?
Deputy Director Denise Froelich, for the record. I apologize. That is a question that I will also need to ask my team on.
I would think that, and I guess the other question I guess you can answer when you're looking at all that, there is a cost to the merchant to dispense electricity, and you'd want to make sure that that was accurate, I would imagine. I mean, I don't know if we're reimbursing the merchant for that, but so anyways. Okay, any other
Mr. Chairman?
questions? Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, good evening. This is Cadence Matievich, the Administrator for the Division of Measurement Standards at the Nevada Department of Agriculture. I know that the hour is late, and so I could provide the answer to a few of those questions, or I would be happy to get that information to your staff to provide to you at a later time.
I would say just send it and share it with us, because you heard what the questions were, so you can just respond to that and send it to staff, and they'll get it to
I'd be
us.
glad to.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions? Assemblywoman Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move for approval.
We have a motion from Assemblywoman Carlton, second from Senator Camizaro. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. All right, so that was item number N. We're now on item number O, Department of Business and Industry Housing Division. This is an informational item only. A status report on the Home Means Nevada initiative and affordable housing is requested. And we have the we have Steve Eichroth and Michael Holliday, Chief Financial Officer.
Good afternoon, Chair Dennis, Vice Chair Carlton, members of the committee. Make this very, very quick. Effectively, the changes that we've seen from the last IFC, we now have our new development and rehabilitation applications open. They will close August 26th. We have an RFQ out for those interested in scoring the financial aspects and developer qualifications for that particular application. Responses to those RFQs are due by the end of the month. We are forming a scoring committee to score the project narrative, site information, amenities, project accessibility section of that particular application. We will be having meetings with those individuals and hope to have that done by the time that the applications will be coming into the division. The application process for homeownership and rehabilitation is just about completed. We've actually used time today in the office to finalize that. So that shall be coming out shortly. And then we are in the development of the land acquisition category applications. And with that, we stand ready to take any questions.
Do we have any questions? Assemblywoman Carlton.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Mr. Aycroft. I know I had asked the question about the senior housing, and I did get a response that this was too soon for you to get us any information now, but you were going to work on that and make that part of your report moving forward. Thank you very much. As we heard earlier today, the vulnerable population is at risk with the high rising costs of rent. So thank you very much for including the senior housing component into your reports in the future.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, that was informational only. So we will move on to item number P. And we do have just item P1B that we pulled. Office of the Governor, Office of Finance, Office of Project Management.
Good evening, Chair Brooks and Vice Chair Carlton. I'm sorry.
Make sure you pull
Chair-
that mic close to your mouth there so we can hear you. There you go.
Good evening, Chair Dennis and Vice Chair Carlton.
That's going
My
to say there was a
apologies.
few that got confused today, but that's okay.
It's a little late this evening, so my apologies, and members of the committee. The report before you is the semi-annual report for the Office of Project Management, the Smart 21 project, which replaces the HR and finance system for the period of January through June 2022. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Well, I think you're fortunate to go last. This is if we would have taken this first, we might be here a while, but I do have a question. So when is the LSI Consulting exit plan and the Gartner project review, when is that going to be completed?
For the record, Melissa Lawfer-Lewis, the OPM is currently working with LSI to come to an agreement in which both the state and the vendor agree on the items. That is currently stalled at the moment. We are working with the vendor to get that information. However, at this time, a formal agreement with the state and the vendor has not been made.
Okay, so my understanding is we've got some pieces of this that work and we're keeping those, but the other part's just not working and we're basically going to go back to ground zero and have to get someone else to do that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, which is unfortunate because we spent some money and we have gotten some product from that, but that kind of sets back trying to get all this done. Can you provide an overview of the various options for continuing the Smart 21 project? And then maybe anticipated implementation timelines, maybe costs?
Sure. For the record, Melissa Lawfer-Lewis. So for the HR side of the system, we had discussed rolling back to our prior system needs. That unfortunately was not going to be viable. We already have recruiting and employee central and learning management system all live in the system right now. So the decision was made to continue with those services. The remaining waves for HR, so employee management, payroll, time and attendance, all of those are currently on hold pending a new systems integrator contract in which the vendor can come in on board and meet with the state, determine what the requirements are, and configure the system as such. It is important to note that we are currently paying for monthly licenses for the software, so really it's just that configuration and implementation piece that would be an additional cost in the future. For the finance side, there was enough concerns from large state agencies that the SAP solution may not work. There's actually quite a large learning curve. So the decision was made to put that project on hold, request an independent assessment to compare the current state processes with all available ERP solutions to make sure that the state was choosing the best financial solution for the state in order to comply with all of our statutory and regulatory requirements. So that is we are working with state purchasing to request that independent assessment. Upon results of that independent assessments, we would either continue with the SAP solution and whatever vendor is implementing the HR side of SAP, or we would have to re-RFP for whatever that new ERP solution would be and an integrator along with that.
So what benefit is the Office of Project Management expecting from conducting that additional assessment of the state financial business processes? And when is it anticipated that will be available?
Melissa Lawfer-Lewis for the record. So the independent financial assessment, we are looking at a time frame of approximately October, November for that contract. My understanding based on kind of market research is approximately it's going to take 60 to 90 days to conduct that research and meet with the state and see what our processes are. The benefits would be, I think it would ease a lot of concerns from some large state agencies. We had several concerns from agencies in terms of banking and overall state reporting to the federal government as well as auditors, that the information would not necessarily align in the new system with our current statutory requirements of budget, account, and category specifically, as well as we didn't quite get into the configuration piece of being able to report like our state CAFRs, so on and so forth. So really just making sure that we are implementing this correctly and meeting all of our requirements for the state.
So you anticipate then that it's going to perhaps look different than the original requirements when you designed it?
Based on Melissa Lawfer-Lewis, for the record, based on additional feedback that we have received as we've been partnering with the state agencies, there does appear to be some requirements that were either initially in the RFP at a very high level, but not necessarily the level of detail that requirement actually needed to be. For example, NRS 353 is not referenced in the requirements whatsoever for the financial side. So that was a bit of a gap.
So that we would probably anticipate then that the cost would go up from what we originally were going to get. At least for those portions that you have to continue, that you have to finish.
That is a possibility, yes.
Great. So then, and then the last question is, when will the amounts paid to LSI Consulting for system implementation services be finalized?
A lot of that, Melissa Lawfer-Lewis, for the record. So a lot of that is pending negotiations with the vendor. What we have processed all invoices that are eligible for payment at this point. It's negotiating with legal counsel and the vendor on what an appropriate reimbursement would be for the partial work that has been completed, since this was a deliverable-based contract and not time and effort. So I don't have a timeline as of yet because we have not reached final negotiations.
But is that something that could be imminent? I mean, in the near future, as opposed to further down the line?
It is absolutely our goal to wrap this up as quickly as possible.
Okay, great. Other questions? I'm not seeing any. Okay. This one's an informational also item, so we'll go ahead and close out that item and hope you're able to get that figured out. All right. We are now going to our next item, which is public comment. Anyone wishing to give public comment? And we're all staring at the one person in the back of the room. Oh, yes. Senator Gokachia wanted to make a public comment, so I'm going to let him go first. And while that's happening, let me just ask real quick before we do that. Is there anyone in Las Vegas that's coming forward?
Chair, I don't think anybody else is here besides us right now.
Okay. And then, so if there is somebody online, I'm telling you now so you can get connected and so we don't have to wait, because I know there's about a 30-second delay or so when I say it and when you hear it. So if you have any online, we'll be back in just a minute. We're going to take a comment from Senator Gokachia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be extremely brief. 30 seconds ought to be enough. I just want to put it on the committee's radar. Clearly, our ag sector is in real trouble in the state of Nevada, predominantly the livestock sector. Input costs, whether it be feed, fertilizer, fuel, are up at least 30%. The receipt for products when they're being sold is down at least 30% from pre-pandemic levels. I've got sheepmen in the state of Nevada that can't get a bid on a set of lambs because last year's crop's still in the feedlot and they haven't moved, can't move them, and so we're really in trouble. I know there's going to be, industry is meeting with the Farm Bureau, and the cattlemen are meeting with the Department of Ag tomorrow and see if they can formulate some kind of a plan coming forward. But I did want to put it on this committee's radar screen. We're going to have to give those guys some help as well. Thank you. They're not homeless yet.
Appreciate those comments. It's always good to keep up with what's going on, and important part of Nevada. So We do have, I think, somebody online. So BPS, if we have someone online, can you please put them on?
If you wish to provide public comment, please press *9 now or raise hand in your Zoom window. Once again, if you wish to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, your line is open and working. However, there are no callers that wish to provide public comment at this time.
Okay, so I guess we have no one online. Thanks, everyone. Really want to appreciate everybody participating. Grateful for staff, the great work that they do, and all the insightful comments and questions that were made today. With that, we have no further items to come before us. We do have a meeting in October. Just put on your radar, we might have a meeting in September, but we don't know yet, but for sure in October. So with that, we have no further items to come before us. We are adjourned.